We're building a full banking app in Figma from scratch. Competitive research? Yep. AI generated graphics? Of course. Onboarding dashboards? Full flow? Done. It's not perfect, but it's real. Let's build. I also just launched UI Collective Academy, where I show you how I built the collective kit, succeed in freelance design, and much more on the way. Check out all that's included on our website. I'll put a link down below. Okay, so like every single great project is you need to start with research. Now, I use Mobbin. You can use things like Dribble if you want to. I find Dribble, like their designs, a little bit more futuristic, but being able to reference competitor designs goes a really long way whenever you're building out any type of presentation. Now, I know we want to build some type of like credit card banking app. So let's go ahead and maybe just search credit card and see what comes up with. Now, what I just like to do, I just like to scroll. And one thing we're only going to start off with right now is what's that landing page that you see within an application itself. So that's really what I'm looking for, is that kind of inspiration. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, I like this one here. So I'm going to copy this. Again, just looking for some examples here that we can base that initial design off of. Saves us from having to go from scratch. And even just small treatments that we like as well. Like personally, I really like this treatment here. I don't know if you can see my screenshot being taken, but I just took a screenshot of this treatment right here. I think that card kind of works. Ooh, and same with this one as well. This, I really like the cleanliness of it. Again, just going to take a couple examples. And also, too, I like the cleanliness of this one as well. Okay, so we have some initial inspiration. Let's bring this into Figma now and start iterating on sort of that initial version of what this main screen might look like, which will inform a lot of the UIs that we're going to build in things like onboarding, and also inform some designs that are also some design inspiration once we get into things like our dashboard and other features as well. Okay, so I kind of like this one right here. It's a little bit modern and it's a little bit scalable, and I like the treatment behind. So what we're going to do here is let's try to like recreate that. So what I've done, I just brought in a MasterCard logo. I just found an image of like a credit card, what's it called? Scanner card chip thing online. Okay. So let's then go ahead. Let's go into our assets, search for our logo components. Let's just switch this to an icon and then just condense this down. All right, we're gonna play around with the sizing to start. So let's just position these as our, let's go ahead, add some auto layout and just sort of extend this out. Oops, we don't want that set to fill. We want that set to fixed. There we go. And then extend this out, and we're going to take this and put this inside of the frame, set this to fill, and then just position it on that right-hand side. And I think things are already starting to come together a little bit. And one thing we also do want is like the type of card it is, whether it's like a debit card. Set this to our text body. And let's just bring this in, connect these two, set those horizontal, set these to fill, and then just reposition, set this to hug. There we go. And just extend this out and then just align that in the middle, and perfect. I think we're good. So now let's go ahead. Let's add in some padding and also like some gap. That's way too tight. So let's set this to also maybe 24 and then bring this in. There we go. So now let's go ahead. Let's add in a quick fill here. Set the radius to something like 24. That's not so bad. But one thing too, I'm going to go ahead and set this to our surface primary default. And let's make some modifications. This will be kind of going to become our white. And then this here is going to become our text body on color. There we go. So I think we're in some half decent shape, and I think things are coming together pretty well. Like if we compare these two here, they are roughly the same already in the grand scheme of things. So let's go ahead. Let's call this our credit card, and let's look at making some sort of visual treatments here in order to make this look a little bit nicer, a little bit modern. Okay, so one thing we're also going to want to do is play around with some different treatments. Now, I kind of like a background treatment, so I'm going to just copy this, use the absolute positioning, and then like extend it up like this, something really big, and then we're just going to send that to back. And let's play around with the opacity. Maybe set that to something like a 2 or like a 4. We can also play around with the opacity types as well, like a plus lighter. That's not so bad. I think there's some tweaks that we can make. But one thing I also want to do is play around some different colors. Again, I think this is kind of harsh for like a credit card or banking application, a little bit too dark. It's a great option. But if we look at them up here, they kind of use like these nice pastel-y colors a lot. I think the black background is a little bit too harsh. And again, we sort of have like that nice shade of blue. So we're going to go into our scales, play around some different options here, and actually create the components of these so that we can swap between them and play around some different treatments that we can use inside of our application. So there's a couple things that we want to tweak, right? So if we make a copy of this, and now if we go back and just into our brand collection here, so I don't have these in surface colors yet. So we want to use like maybe like these pastel colors a little bit that kind of liven things up. They might even be, that's not so bad. I'm not a big fan of the purple, actually. Let's go into our reds. Red's my favorite color. Let's find like one of these good pastel colors that could work. And I think these are really nice, like these shades of pastel. So maybe if we take this as an example here, because there's still something that we need to worry about. Now, if you think about a credit card, is a credit card, like this is a great treatment for what's up here. But you might want to personalize the experience eventually by actually having someone's name on the actual card itself. Right? So what we're going to do is we're going to play around with this treatment in order to have a name down here. So when we create the component of this, we have a variant that we can swap between. One that's our basic and one that's our more personalized that has a user's name on the credit card itself. So now we might need an option that has someone's name, right? So what we're going to do, let's copy this and let's move these off to the side and then get rid of this logo here. Okay. Sorry, I'm just thinking on my feet. Let's select both of these, set the gap to something like 8, keep it nice and tight. Maybe just want to shrink this logo down entirely. Something like that works. So what we're going to do is we think about a credit card. Maybe we put a name here. So like collective card, and then Kirk McNeil. Then we copy the text here. And then just add our credit card number. So like 000-000-111010, or sorry, not zero, stars. And then maybe an expiry too. So, but first let's figure out what the issue here is. So let's set this to hug and hug. Let's set this to hug and hug. Let's set this to, let's bring this inside. There we go. That's the issue. Sorry. And then let's look for our expiry. So like 0129. And then maybe we can also shrink these text sizes way down as well. Set this like a regular or small regular. And let's sort of extend this out to give ourselves maximum space here. Set that to fill. There we go. Now, one thing that still worries me when we have text like this is the contrast. We might need to make this a little bit darker. So if we set this something like a, I really like that darker one. Let's go with that. Again, we're just winging it here on the fly. Okay, so we're going to roll with this pink. I think this is pretty good. And maybe one thing we want to play around too is if we maybe just want to play around with the subtle gradient of it. Let's see how that looks. Let's copy this. Darker doesn't look good. Maybe if we go just one shade lighter above. Yeah, it's not so bad. We'll roll with this one. For now, I'll transfer the gradient over here a little bit later. Okay, so we have our collective card. Let's shrink this down even to something like 4. Maybe we want to set this to our small regular. There we go. And I think we're in some pretty decent shape. Let's see if it looks like this is kind of more or less in the center, but it's fine for now. I don't think anyone's going to notice. Okay, so maybe one thing we'll actually just do is we're just going to set this to 2, keep it as close to as possible, and to account for a longer name, we can also set this to something like our small as well. There we go. And I think that's more aligned in the center. So now we have our 2 credit card types. And one thing we're going to want to do is just actually add in that gradient here as well. So we can copy it over. Sorry, I should have added it as a style, but I am a rule breaker, so forgive me. So for this one, copy this here, and let's make sure we copy the exact same gradients. As we had over here. 5, and then this one was the lighter, so let's set that as such. There we go. Not half bad. Okay, so now we can go ahead. Let's select all of these. What we're going to do is just create the component set of these. Actually, we don't even need to do this one. We can create the component set of these, create the component set that we're going to call credit card. This here is going to be our type. This here might be our basic, and then this one might be our name. There we go. Something like that works just fine. So we might come back here a little bit later on, make some tweaks to these cards, maybe change around like the colors, the styles to offer some different options. But I think where we want to move next is sort of laying the foundation for the look and feel of the homepage. Because you notice like there's a treatment here, there's a treatment here, there's treatments here, there's a treatment here. So it looks like every one of like these competitors have that kind of card treatment on the front. Now let's look at how we can use actually AI, because again, I'm not a Photoshop expert. I wasn't like glory days. I'm not anymore. I don't know if anyone uses Photoshop still, if I'm honest. So let's look at how we can recreate one of these treatments using AI and bring that right into our screen to save us a ton of time. Okay, sorry, before we get to that, a couple things that I've done here. I decided to drop the gradient after all. I just wasn't the biggest fan of it, and I added some different colors and just variants here that we can swap between. We might add more colors, we might take some away later. Now, we need to build a treatment, because again, if we look at all of the sort of these landing pages, they all have some type of treatment to it. This has sort of like the sparkly one. This one's more realistic in a hand. This one has coins with it. This one's a little bit mauve with some overlapping. Now, this treatment I think we can use in the future in different capacities, but I kind of like this treatment here and also this treatment here, which is a little bit real life. I think the coins are a little bit cheesy. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take a screenshot of one of these cards, maybe our purple one for now, just because that's the core UI collective color. And then I'm going to provide ChatGPT screenshots of this and have it actually build me a treatment that we can easily slot in to that homepage. So here we are just within ChatGPT, and I decided to only use sort of the one example that we have right here. We have this kind of card treatment. The reason why I didn't use the hand is because I was worried that it wouldn't fully capture the arm, and sort of our CTA would be sitting upon, our CTA at the bottom would be sitting upon like a really large hand, which is kind of awkward. So I have that example along with just this one card here that I've also included in this ChatGPT prompt. So we're going to have it recreate one of those treatments. So the prompt is as follows. The card should be clearly visible and realistic. Oops, sorry, let me zoom to the top. I'm looking for a high quality treatment of a credit card for the home screen of a modern banking app. This screen appears when the user first opens up the app, hasn't signed in or signed up yet. I've attached a visual reference I like. Subtle sparkles or light flares to convey prestige and polish, and a card slightly tilted to offer a sense of depth. Please design a similar scene using the attached card. The goal is to create a welcoming premium visual that feels secure and aspirational. We get into some requirements here. And again, I gave examples that were like an Apple Card or Cash App vibe. So let's see what it goes ahead and comes back with. So let's enter that, and then I'm going to pause the video and then jump back once it generates something. So I ended up going through here, and this is the first result that I got. And as much as I like the purple, I decided just the main color in our collective kit is sort of the darker. So I actually provided the darker one instead. It had to provide me this option. Now, one thing that's new that I noticed within ChatGPT is before it had issues generating the full, like a transparent PNG. But now this time when I asked, it seems to be working just fine. So we actually go ahead, download this option here. Now let's bring this into Figma and design that homepage screen. Okay, so here I am just on the page here, and now we have our treatment here. So you can see just a couple prompts what would have taken us in the past several hours in Photoshop to do things like this. We can now use ChatGPT in order to do that for us. So we have some this initial card here. Now, one thing that's important to note is we don't want to include this at the bottom. I know in the past, earlier on, I was talking about how I like this hand treatment, but I was, again, just worried that ChatGPT would include too much of the arm. It would just, the button would be sitting on an arm itself, which I think is just like kind of weird a little bit. Okay, so one thing we're going to play around some different options here. One thing I want to check out is maybe if we want to set this to our surface defaults. Yeah, it's way too dark. So we're going to set that back to the white. Maybe if we go with a surface, maybe our secondary. So it's not fully white, but it is sort of like that lighter, almost like a lighter gray slate background. And again, the variable library, we do have a video on building that variable library. But again, it was also included in the UI Collective Academy. So let's just maybe play around some text options here, something like modern banking. And again, probably going to use ChatGPT to play around with the content as well. So we can set this to like our, oops, I don't want to use the iOS kit that I have connected for some reason, but let's maybe go with an H, like an H4 medium. It's just too tight. Maybe we'll go with a semi-bold. Now, one thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to detach the style because I want to reduce like the height here. And again, what we're doing right now is just getting sort of the rough format down. We're going to refine the text a little bit later on. So first off, set this to our text heading. There we go. Maybe if we set this to our larger size, like the H3, maybe set this to something like 40, 44. Maybe just change this to like one account every bank. Make it a little bit beefier. Modern banking is just a little bit cheesier. Again, some sort of value prop here. Maybe we set this back to like a 40. Let's see. Oops, sorry. I know this is violating the design system, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do for different use cases. So one account every bank, something like that. I think we're missing a logo as well. Again, we're going to make this much nicer. Again, just getting the framework down. And we're just going to set this to our icon logo and shrink this down here. There we go. One account every bank. And we're also going to need some type of button as well. So let's bring in our button component and set this maybe to like it's our default. Default's a little bit too small in this case. Let's maybe set this to our medium and extend this out. So we might have like a sign up, and then also like a login, sign up, or like get started. And then let's maybe go with login, like have an account, something like that. And we're going to set this to our, let's go with our secondary. It's not so bad. Maybe we want to set this to our outline, or even just our transparent as well. Have an account. Yeah, I think that keeps a little bit more emphasis on sort of that primary button there. So we can go ahead, we can group these together and then set this something like 14 in between. So I think it's coming along pretty well. One thing I do still want to add that I think we need is some type of text here, or some type of subtext. So here is some subtext. Here's some subtext. Here's some subtext, set that to our body, text body, and then just add in some fake copy for now. Link every bank account you have in one application. No more bouncing between. Again, we'll refine the content, but I just want to get some copy in there now just to play around with how it might look. So it's already looking kind of clean. I don't think it looks that bad here. So one thing I'm also going to experiment with as well, again, just watching me real time here, is it is always nice to sort of have some type of background treatment in behind, sort of add some sense and depth. So I almost wonder if we apply our surface defaults. Oops, I have these up here as well. So let's maybe just set this to a darker color. Yeah, and I can see when we do that, notice that we get a little bit too close to where we want to be with some like the Apple elements. So let's send this to the back. If we lost our logo for whatever reason, so let's copy that and bring it inside here. Maybe we're just going to get rid of this one for now, just so we don't keep looking at the older one. And let's set this to our on color caption, and this one to our heading on color. And now let's bring in the logo here and just change this to the white. There we go. Something like that I think is kind of okay. So one account, every bank. There we go. So now we can keep playing around with it a little bit. Maybe if we move this a little bit farther down, we might get a little more space at the top. But if we go back and look at some of the examples that we have, it almost looks like we need some type of disclaimer text. I don't know if we're going to introduce sort of this treatment here, but we can if we want to. So some type of disclaimer text here. So let's just bring this down and then just set this to our, let's go with our caption. There we go. Maybe if we set this to our smaller color, so like our small regular. There we go. And then, again, just playing around with it. We'll tweak the text a little bit later. Maybe if we do go back to adding in this outline, so our default outline. There we go. I don't know if that's a little bit too harsh or not, but we're going to play around with it. So now that I think we have the rough framework down, one thing we'll do, I was going to modify some of the content and maybe make one or two tweaks, and we're going to circle back here. So now you can see the design that I've landed on. Okay, I'm going to take you through some of the changes that I made here. Again, I still need to go through and add some auto layout to this. But again, whenever I'm just sort of building UIs from scratch, I never add auto layout to the beginning. So one thing I've done here is I use ChatGPT to clean up sort of the subtext here. And I've also interchanged the weighting here. So this here is our medium font, and then this here is our bold font, again, just to offer a little bit of like different treatment. I also got rid of the second button for login. I just think it was getting in the way. And again, sort of the rationale for that, like maybe if I hit get started, system's going to recognize if I have Face ID or not, either take me to sign up or login page, or even just like take me right into the application itself. I also added in some of the disclaimer text here. And now one thing that I was also experimenting with, if I undo this to get back to where I was before, there we go, was also playing around with some type of treatment here with a logo treatment. But I just felt like having the logo here, and the logo at the background is a little bit overkill, right? So we also do have this sort of subtle gradient coming from the top left. I think I might have covered that already. But anyway, so this is sort of the home screen that I've landed on. So you can see in how really no time at all, we've gone from not having any page or application, having this half decent looking page for when users to open up our application. Again, using tools like GPT and just the items available in our design system, we can spin up a relatively decent looking UI relatively quickly. Now, one thing I would like to call out is we did have more time. We can jam on other designers, really polish this up to another degree. But again, I'm going to leave that for you. Now, one thing I've just gone ahead and done as well is I just added some auto layout here. So 36 and 64. Again, we might come back and adjust that a little bit later on. But again, just in terms of simplicity, I added some auto layouts to this page. Now, you can make the argument that this page as it is a little harsh with the black background. So let's play around with another iteration that's a little bit less harsh and maybe a little bit more modern with some gradients. So one thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to just copy 3 circles here. And this is a really good gradient technique. We're going to set this like our slate 200, set this to our surface defaults. Okay, I'm going to select each of these, group these together, and then add an effect. That's going to be our layer blur. And then we're going to set that to like something like 150. Then what we can do is let's get rid of this and let's adjust the colors here. There we go. And maybe we can adjust this to like 24. And we can also do the same thing for here as well. Should have made that a component, but it is what it is. And then also these two. Let's just adjust these. There we go. So what we can do then is we can copy it, use our absolute positioning tool. And now we can control where it goes, right? So now one thing we can do here is just like paste this in behind. So it sort of has like that subtle effect almost. Again, you might want a little bit more color, even to soften it a little bit. But there's how you can use a gradient to sort of give it like this sort of background dimension if you think that this gradient is a little harsh. Again, this might look a little bit better if we did have some color, but again, we're operating under a short timeline here, so I'll leave you to it. But again, 2 different options for us. Okay, so now let's go back to Mobbin and look at some onboarding experiences. So again, I just search credit card and to see what comes up. This here, I think, is super slick. So let me take a screenshot of this one right here, like a choose your card type thing. I think that's cool. So we have some type of onboarding here, and just taking examples of what other companies have done. This treatment here is kind of cool, but I'm focused on onboarding, so I think maybe I should have refined my search a little bit for onboarding. So let's search about credit card onboarding here. Credit card onboarding. Nothing came up there. Oh, Neo Financial. They're a pretty big one. So let's look at what Neo Financial does. Again, we're just sort of jamming together on this. Sorry, I know it might be a little bit boring for you, but we have some treatments here as well that we like. This treatment's kind of cool. It's like you're approved for a budget. Maybe we want to check Wealth Simple. I don't know if they have Wealth Simple where you are, but Wealth Simple is pretty big here in Canada, where they sort of have like these nice treatments, kind of like a really simple design. Use Face ID to log in. Anyways, I want to keep going through Mobbin here, find some screens that I like, but again, I want to take you for the ride just to start off with. So once I have all the screens that I like, we're going to move back to Figma. I'll walk them through them with you, and then we can start building out our onboarding flow. Okay, so one thing we're going to need now is our onboarding. So I'm going to bring down this screen, and I've already done some screenshots here. Again, just grab screens that I like. I might come back and revisit certain ones a little bit later and reference certain treatments. But we're going to come back to this very shortly, but we're going to need an onboarding here. And there's one particular screen that I really like in terms of onboarding. One thing I don't really like with my onboarding, again, this is just personal preference, is I don't really like the dots that you might see at the top screen. I just find they get in the way. I've done some designs like that in the past, but I'm not a big fan. One approach I do really like here, just got some inspiration. I can't remember what the competitor was. They sort of have like this bar here that we like. So one thing I'm going to do is let's go ahead and just let's get rid of this. Let's get rid of that. And let's just get rid of the logo here. We can keep the text. So with this, I'm going to go ahead and pull in from the collective kit. Again, pull in a progress bar. You'll likely already have a progress bar component in your design system. If you don't, I do have some tutorials on that in the UI Collective Academy. And once this loads, there we go. We can just go ahead and just simply pull this in. Okay, so one thing we're going to do is let's just simply copy and paste it inside, just like that. And one thing we're going to do here as well is you notice this is full width, but because we have auto layout on this frame now, we no longer want that full width. So what I'm actually going to do is we have this set to 36 and 64. I'm going to drop this to 0, 0, and 0. Oops, we can keep it the one above. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select both of these. Why is this wrong? It should be set to fill. Okay, there we go. I'm going to select both of these, and this can also then be set to fill. And now I'm going to add the padding just on this block. Yeah, there's a couple different ways that you can set this up, but again, I really want this full width. And one thing too, we can also do is we can set this to our surface default for white to keep things a little bit clearer. Now, what's another thing that we need here? So we need some type of method above that. So what we can do is maybe just if we just, how do we want to handle this? Let's copy this text here and then paste it above and just call this step like 1 of 5. And then we can add set this to hug and hug. There we go. And then position it above that progress bar. And the way that we've set up our progress bar, if you watch the tutorials on UI Collective Academy, is we can easily just adjust the completion rate. So we don't really need to worry about that. And maybe we'll set this to something like 12 or so. So now we have sort of that first step. Again, we can make tweaks to that if we want to, but I think that's how we're going to set things up, where our sort of content has the padding. But again, we want this to be full width and not absolute positioned. So that's how we're going to set things up. Anyways, now that we have that set up, let's go ahead and start building out some of the rest of the onboarding pages. And by rest of the onboarding pages, what I mean is this page to start. So still some tweaks we want to make here. Let's set this to our body, just make it stand out a little bit more. Maybe we want to set this like a medium as well, so it stands out. And then what we can do, we'll just get rid of this text. And then what we can do as well is also just shrink this to like our H6 or something like that, like a medium, and then make sure that this is set to hug and hug. And then we can do something like, add your email. And then, sorry, I've got some text here. I'm just going to paste in just so you don't have to watch me paste text in everyone or write text on its own, because that could be pretty boring. And then set this to hug. Okay. Now, one thing too is looks like we've got an extra space there and 2 extra spaces. So there we go. Now, what's one thing that we're missing from this field, right? From this page is we're missing a field. So I'm going to go in and search for our field components or your input component. Once it loads for me. There we go. And we can just pull this in and maybe hide that icon, right? Again, I have tutorials to do this both on YouTube and UI Collective Academy. UI Collective Academy is far more complex than some of the other things on YouTube. But anyways, we're going to keep continuing. And then there we go. And let's just be sure to set this to fill. So add your email. And one thing too that always really helps is, I'm actually going to add a quick border here. Sorry, just so I can see the outline of it. And we're going to move it later on, but not needed, is visualize how your app is going to look when someone has a keyboard open on a phone. Right. So that's something I see with a lot of onboarding processes is like the onboarding. It's like they might have like 6 fields like this, but then when the keyboard comes up, it starts pushing things. And then all of a sudden you have a scroll, and that's what you want to avoid. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull in one of the components from Apple's design system in order to visualize how that would properly look. So inside of the Apple design system, again, they come built into Figma as you have the keyboards that you can pull in to visualize. So we're just going to position that on the inside, set that to fill. That doesn't really matter. And we're just going to set this to fill. And because we have the gap at the bottom, or the padding at the bottom, we can set that to 0, right? So one thing as well that we can do is we always want the position of our button to be relatively consistent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to group these together and then add this to a fill, so that button always stays at the bottom. And that's going to give us some space if we want to add a couple fields in the future here, still maintaining the keyboard position. So if we have our email here, we can maybe just set this to blank to start, to add your email, and then something like send verification code. And there we go. I think we have a pretty half decent looking screen, kind of similar to this and similar to some of the other inspiration that I saw on Mobbin. So now that we have this out of the way, let's now look at like what that one-time password code could possibly be. Okay, so with the email in there, now what we can do is we can also go ahead and add in like enter the OTP, enter the one-time password, and then continue. And then one thing we can do here is this is set to, maybe we'll set this to 30% or 40%. Again, I don't actually know how many steps we want to build. Okay, so one thing as well, again, tutorials are in the collective kit for this kind of stuff, or in the academy for this, but we're going to build like a one-time password. So one thing I'm going to do, I'm going to set this to our body. Let's go with our body large regular. No, maybe we'll go with a heading regular. And we're just going to add some auto layout to this, okay? And we're going to set this to something like 52 by 52. Why not? Sure. Let's go ahead and set this to fill. This can be our surface defaults. And we can add a stroke. That's our border defaults for this. And then set this to round. So our radius, which is like a round radius. There we go. And then what we can do here, again, we're getting into some more like advanced componentry stuff. But while you're here, I'm just going to show you. So we can call this our one-time password. That's where we can add a variant to this. So maybe you might have something like you might have your blank. So if you just call this our type, this might be our empty, this might be our active, and then this might be our filled. So for this, what we can do, if this is empty, maybe we just leave it empty and then get rid of the text. And for active, we can set this like our surface defaults, and then our border defaults, and then our text on color. There we go. And then here is make sure we apply like our heading color. There we go. So now we sort of have like those one-time heading variants, right? So one thing we can do here, it's not what I wanted to do, is we can go ahead and maybe just select 4 of these, 3 and 4. We might shrink the size. I really didn't check that pefore. Again, we're playing as we go here, and then paste that in. And then one thing we can do, actually, sorry, we should paste it in here. And then there we have our one-time password, right? So I can go ahead, center that. You can add 5 if you want to. Maybe this one is our filled, and then maybe this one here is also filled, and then maybe this one here is also active. So there we have that one-time password component. And one thing we can even do is even just stretch it out a little bit, but half decent in the grand scheme of things. I might come back and, I think it looks a little bit weird right now. It might just be the size. I don't know. I'll leave you to play around with it. But that's how you can ultimately build a one-time password component here. That's relatively easy and looks pretty good in the grand scheme of things. Maybe if we add just like a 6th or a 5th, that might even things out. Yeah, I think that looks a little bit better. So there you have like your one-time passwords. Then we can copy in text. I don't have text ready, but enter. Oops, sorry. Something like enter the one-time password, the one time password we sent to your email address. And then maybe we might also want to add just like a CTA below it for something like didn't get the email, or missing the email, or like something like click to resend, something like that. And we can also set that to like a regular link if we want to as well. It's another option, but I'm going to ignore that for now. Okay, we change this to 205. There we go. So then there we have the one-time password with also the component to go along with it. So now that we have that verification for an account, and one thing as well that we're going to want to do is if we set this to our numbers and punctuation, there we go. But one thing as well here that you're going to notice is what that did is then shifted like our click area down a bit. So let's look at how we can handle that next. Now, this is something that comes in the annotations, but you don't want a developer to see this and then all of a sudden assume that the click area should change on the different key navigations, right? It sort of creates a weird experience. I've seen it done on mobile, but my personal opinion is where the click area always stays in the exact same location. My own personal preference, feel free to say otherwise. So when we run into a scenario like this, is you can bring out your guides and try to get as spot on as possible. Looks pretty good. And then what you can do is you can add some padding on the bottom here. So something like 64. That's too big. Let's go like 48. Let's go 44. Even like 43. It's a little bit, 42. 46. Maybe 45. Yeah, so it looks like it's 45 pixels. Again, personal preference. The way I like to do things is I always like my click area in one spot because that's best practice on desktop as well. Now, between the two navigations, I can see why someone would think that that white space below is now a little bit more awkward. Okay. So again, you can handle that different ways that you want to, but if you do want that click area the exact same position every time, you can just add some padding to just adjust for the gap and make sure that you highlight that for your developers inside of those annotations. So now one thing we're also going to do here is we're also going to add in like a first name, last name type thing. Now, one thing that's important to note here is when it comes to banking applications, the onboarding can be quite extensive and quite a lot. So we're not going to go through and start asking for things like address and things like that. Yeah, we just be repeating like a lot of the same practice that we have here. I want to start exploring some different treatments of things, sort of get your feet wet with different, how you can design a little bit different. So this might be the last one in terms of like personal information that we're going to ask for. Before we start, maybe might look at things like what are your financial goals, and maybe you want to link an account to this application. Things are a little bit more complex that would look better in a portfolio than just like 15 different pages of like onboarding. So maybe just one more. So what can we call you? What can we call you? Something like, let's get to know each other. Let's get to know each other. Some just cheesy text or something like that on a first name basis. And you have first name, last name. Maybe we want to group these together and stuff that's like 12, so it's a little bit more tight, or something even like 18. I think we're good there. So then something like continue, and then let's be sure to update our progress bar. Again, we might come back and adjust this so there's more steps, less steps. But anyways, for now, step 3 of 5. There we go. So in just a couple minutes. So we have like some initial screens that look pretty good, pretty clean, kind of mimic like a lot of like inspiration that I saw, sort of the clean white look on different applications, things like Wealth Simple, so on and so forth. Okay. So now let's look at some more complex screens. Maybe we want to look at goals or how much you're able to invest. And also maybe you want to link an account as well. I think that'd be a really good treatment for us to explore. Okay, so now let's experiment with a different treatment of page, right? Because you can play around with these all you want. If you want to add different things like address, collecting all the types of basic information is one thing. I guess, again, if we're a bank, maybe your objective is to get people into the bank and to invest their money in our bank and move their money from their bank to our bank. So maybe we want to have a page where it's like, how much are you planning to invest, to transfer, bring to the collective bank? So maybe just the collective, keep it on 2 lines again. We're not going to be a content designer now. So with that, right, is maybe we just want it to be sort of like a selectable option. We're selecting a specific dollar value that we want to bring into the bank. So with that, what we can do here is we can actually go ahead and let's build out a mini components like 0 to 50K, and then add in some. Let's add some auto layout, set this to our surface default, add in a stroke, which is our border default. Set the radius to whatever that round value is. And let's set that to something like 14. And let's go ahead and just call this like, I don't know, like our tag or something. Let's create the component of this and then add in a variant here. So we're going to have like a selected versus like a not selected value. We're just going to set these to our defaults and then set this to our text body. There we go. So now we can select these, maybe bring 2 by side, and then just paste it in here. So it's really just like a selectable value in terms of how much they're looking to bring into the bank. So then we can go like 51 to 100K, and then put this onto 2 lines now. So we can go like 101K to like 250K. We can go like 250K. K to like 500K, and maybe we might have one more value for like a million plus. So 1 mil or 500K to 1 mil, 500K to 1 mil, and then 1 mil plus, something like that. And then we can condense these, put these inside a frame, set these to 12, and maybe show that like 1 here is selected. So we have our type, and then there's 1 that's selected. And one thing too, set this to type. This can be our unselected and then our selected. And one thing I want to play around with too is maybe we just shrink the size of these actually. So instead of 10, maybe we go like an 8, keep things a little bit tighter. Yeah, something like that works. And again, our CTA is at the bottom because we wouldn't really need, what's the word I'm looking for? A keyboard wouldn't necessarily be necessary here, right? Now, one thing whenever I see pages like this is I'm like, especially if you're collecting important information about how much someone's willing to invest, is you almost want to encourage them to invest more or pay more right away. So in this case, maybe we can use up this white space to add like some type of, not necessarily an advertisement, but rationale as to why they might be interested in actually investing more money, something like that. Again, just to beef up this white space a little bit. So let's look at that next. So let's look at what we can maybe add here to the bottom in order to spruce this up a little bit. So maybe something that's like our body large, semi-bold, increase your investments to unlock additional perks. I don't know, something like that. Set this to like our body. And again, the way I'm sort of imagining it here is maybe as they make a selection, sort of it's almost like a dynamic widget that updates like, oh, you're bringing in X amount, maybe you get this, you get that, I don't know, something like that. It might not be the best use case for a bank because people might only have a certain amount of money to set aside, but again, getting us exploring some different treatments, we have some fun with it. So then maybe below we might be like, increase your investment to unlock additional perks. And maybe if we go in, just pull in like a check or something, not from but from the design system. Again, for all our icons, we use the material icons. This would load. There we go. So we can pull in like a check icon, set this to round, and then it can be something like, I don't know, if we set this to our medium regular, so like commission-free trading, what do you want to call it? Commission-free trading, 0.5% fee for managed investments, something like that. And then managed investments, and then something like 4% interest on all savings accounts, something like that, where it sort of shows you sort of the perks that you might get from hitting a certain milestone. So maybe we can set this something like 4, and then between all these, we can go set these to like 12 or something. And there we go. Maybe it might be interesting to also like increase your investment to unlock additional perks. Let's put this inside of the frame and then see what we want to add here. So we set this to fill, surface default, our stroke, which is going to be our border default. And let's also set some padding here. And we can reduce the gap between something like 24, and then maybe increase. I don't know, set the radius to something like 12. Let's see what it looks like. I think it's going to be missing a certain element here. So first off, when we paste it inside, things sort of get cut down. So let's shrink this text here to our small regular, and then set these to fill. Oops, that's not what we want to have happen. There we go. So set these to fill. What's going on here? That's set to fill. I set something up wrong here. So let's go ahead and troubleshoot. So that's set to fill. And then this should be set to fill. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. So I'm just going to go ahead and just copy these, paste down, and then copy, and then paste. And we can get rid of these two here. And then these set to, what do you say? We want to set these to our small. So our small regular, something still looks broken here. Set this to fill. And then set this to fill. Sorry, everyone, I'm silly. And we might want to shrink this to like our body medium, something like that. So now let's go ahead and now let's paste this back in, but delete this one here, and then move this up, and then set this to fill. And I think that's actually pretty good. I kind of want it at the bottom a bit, but I think it still needs like some level of spruce to it. I think it looks a little bit boring. So I think maybe where I'm sort of running into, may not look as good, as I think we need some more differentiation. So you recall before I set our surface secondary to our surface default, and now we change it back. That surface secondary is what it does. It actually gives us sort of like a little bit more differentiation. A lot of those white elements, like the forms, even things like this as well, it helps things stand out a little bit more instead of just having everything as a white background. So I think maybe we might proceed with this. Now, one thing as well that I'm noticing here, as I sort of made these components, but it is what it is. Maybe if we shrink the size of our checkbox a little bit, to like 20 by 20, it's going to keep things a little bit tighter. I felt like maybe the icons sort of looked a little out of place. Again, 20 by 20. And we can adjust. Maybe we don't want to set it to 12, but something like 8. And then set this to like 12, No, we'll go back. Now, one thing we might want to do as well is if we bring in one of these tags here, just detach it and then set this to like our small regular. Oops, these don't have a style tied to it. And so our text body, sorry about that. And we just shrink this to like 4 and then like 10. We can be like 100K, 100,000 investments required. I don't know, something like that. Sort of let the user know like how much is required to sort of hit all these items. So something like that could work just fine. Let's maybe adjust the gap in between here and even set this to our body. I think something like that works. But again, I think it just needs more color. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go into our badge component here. And I already showed you how to create a tag. A badge component's pretty similar. If Figma is going to load for me. There we go. So let's bring in a badge. I think we maybe need a little bit more color. So if we set this to our text, set this then to our extra small, we can hide the icons. And what we can do then is we can maybe set this to our success and then copy in the text where it's like, oops, $100,000 investment required. I think that looks a little bit better already in the grand scheme of things. Let me know what you think, and maybe we can drop this to our border default subtle so it blends into the background a little bit more. I think that's already looking a little bit better, where it calls out explicitly what's needed, what you get out of it. And we can even go one step farther and set this to our extra small regular as well if we want. But again, just another treatment that we might want to explore. Maybe this here is our 4 or 5. And let's go ahead, set this to like our 70. And now let's look at, so now we have like this sort of different treatment here. Now what we can do is maybe we want to introduce the idea of like choosing a color of your cards. Again, you will call back, we have these different colors right here. And then also maybe like how a user might want to link an account. So maybe like connect their existing bank accounts to our application. Okay, so now what we want to maybe go ahead and talk about is linking an account. Because if we think about the concept, maybe like this idea that we're having where you can sort of link your different bank accounts and manage them all within one application instead of having to switch between apps. So one thing that's really important for this is the linking process itself. So maybe this can be step 5 of 5 in the process. We can sort of set this then to our 100. So this is maybe our step 5 of 5. And now let's work to set this up. So one thing I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to bring in a form field. And we're just going to paste this in, and I'm going to remove all of these, remove those elements. And maybe this is like a search, because if we think about like all the different banks that you can connect with, probably makes sense to have somewhere that you can search. Just think about all the different banks in North America, the world, whatever. And then if our search icon would load, sorry, my connection is really slow today. Okay, so one thing I've done, so my search element loaded, and I just brought in some different logos here from just different banks. I just used ChatGPT to ask me what banks start with A, so I grabbed a couple. So one thing we might want to do as well here is just paste in something below the search bar. So for someone user who gets this page, they know exactly what it is that they're doing. And I'm just going to copy in just some text here. So you don't need to watch me type it. And then something like, oops, sorry, I did not paste that in right. Come on. There we go. Where you need to link your bank to collect before you can make any deposits or withdrawals. Maybe we want to drop this to like our small regular, something like that. So hopefully you can see how this is all sort of coming together now. Now, one thing we're going to need is we have the search bar where a user can search for a different bank. You know, maybe it's global, so there's a ton of different banks that you can search from. So that's where I sort of brought in these logos here. Because one thing we're going to do is if I go here and just enter in like American Express Bank, and set this to our medium, something like that. I can select both of these, set this to a hug and align these in the center, maybe adjust the gap, something like 12, maybe 18, something like that, where now we have the different banks here. So if I just copy this, so I move this up, so do, and then bring this in, just like that, and then bring this down, get rid of this one, sorry, and then just like that. Is now we sort of have what these banks, you can see what the banks are as you're scrolling through, right? So if this is Ally Bank, oops, sorry, this one above is the Ally Bank. Allied Bank. This one here is Axis Bank, and then we have American Express Bank, so on and so forth. So what we can do is we can piece these together, set them to like a 24, and then maybe if we copy some text and sort of we have a grouping, right? So we have a grouping of everything that's A. And one thing also we need to do, sorry, is set this to our body, our text body. There we go. Oops. What's going on? Our text body. Sorry. This is our text body, something like that. And then we have our A. So maybe we want to set this to our large, like semi-bold. So you see the different groupings. So, and then if we think about this in the context of our UI, is what we can then offer is we just paste this inside and then delete this, where a user can actually like scroll through all of the different letters in here and make a search for them as well, again, based on the alphabet. Now, there's a couple things we would want to set up and do before we do this right. Because we think about the context of a prototype, you kind of want the user to scroll a little bit. So we're going to show you how we can build that interaction and also show how we can almost signify that there are other elements below the fold of the page. And if you look at it now, sure, we do see that the American Express logo is kind of like cutting it off. So user might think to scroll, but if I was to kind of like just adjust this gap a little bit to something like 28, or 30, then all of a sudden it doesn't look as if there's anything there. So we kind of want to show the user at all times that there is that kind of effect. Now, one thing you can also do as well, something I'd probably suggest, is actually creating a component of this that you call your bank items, and then this goes in, but just for the purposes of not having to watch you swap the logo every time, or for not having to watch me swap the logos, we're just going to leave it as not component size for now. But again, you can also make a component of your bank items if you want to be able to adjust all those styles. Okay. So now that we have sort of the base framework in, let's keep moving forward. So one thing I'd always suggest doing is whenever you come to like these kind of items, where it's long scrollable items that are hidden behind like a frame, is what a lot of designers tend to do is they can't remember what's there. They tend to just extend the frame, right? And that causes a massive pain. It causes a massive headache, sorry. So what you can do instead, just my own personal preference, is again, what we would ideally do in this case is we would create the component of this, bring this down, or sorry, not the component of this, sorry, the component of our bank items. Then for each of the ones inside the letters, what we would do is we'd like group these together. So if this becomes like your B, this one becomes your C and your D, so on and so forth. And then this one becomes your E. What I would do is I'd actually create the component of this. And then what I would do then is I would then paste that in. So inside my components, I always have a reference as to what the design was. So I don't need to extend the frame every time. It's just going to update automatically. With me so far? Perfect. So what I would do then is I could then delete that. Oh, sorry, what's going on here? No, copy, paste. There we go. And then we can set this to fill. And then one thing you're going to want to do here is just extend this up. Okay, so you're going to want to set that to the bottom, the frame. And to do that, I held Command and then pull up. Because then what happens, if I preview this, something's still off with our scroll. Let's take a look at what happens. So set to no scroll. The overflow is set to no scrolling. So we're going to want it vertical. So there we go. Now we have that scrolling. Okay, so that's a really important trick, is you do want to introduce that scrolling mechanism, is you do need to bring that frame up. Okay, so now that we have, sorry, let's go ahead, close this. So now that we have that part out of the way, one thing we're still going to want to introduce is this idea of like almost having like a gradient to show that it's scrollable. So what I'm going to do here in this case then is we're going to add in just sort of rectangle. And let's apply a gradient to it. So let's go ahead, apply a gradient. We're just going to set this to 0, and then this here to 0. And then on the top, we're just going to set this to 0%, or sorry, set them to white, not to 0. And we're just going to paste this above. Okay. Now, one thing to do, I'm going to use our absolute positioning and just extend this out. And what that's going to do is going to signify that there's like this extra scrollable area. Now, one thing that's important to note as well is we are actually using like our secondary. So if we go into our secondary, our page secondary, our page, what color am I using here? It's our surface secondary, sorry. We're using our surface secondary. So let's go with our surface secondary. and then just detach, copy, and we can add that gradient back in. Again, just because the background is that secondary, it might just look a little bit awkward if we have that white on it. So my apologies there. So what we can do then is then bring these up just like that. Copy in our hex codes here, and then set this to 0%. And now it sort of blends in a little bit better. So now it looks as if there's additional items there that we can scroll through. Okay. So in this case, what essentially we're doing here, again, just to reiterate, is we're linking all the different accounts that we want to connect to this bank. Now, how do we connect those accounts? And one thing we're to look at next, a little bit of a different treatment outside of this step idea, where it actually shows more information about what it is that you're connecting. So you can actually choose to connect that bank if you'd like to. Okay, now what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to bring in a page to ask them to confirm to link this account. Now, for this, one thing I'm actually going to do is I'm going to bring in this old homepage that we've done before, okay? And I want to get rid of a lot of these elements. Don't know why we had a thing there, but let's get rid of the logo too. Let's get rid of this text for now. And let's go ahead and just bring in, first off, let's maybe just bring in one of these logo, our American Express logo, okay? So let's bring in and place it at the top. And we're just going to align it in the center. And let's make it much bigger, set it to like 100. There we go, something like that. And we're also going to need inside this library, let's look for our chevron or arrow, whatever it's called. If this will load for me. Okay, so now that we're this loaded, let's bring in our chevron. And one thing we can do here is maybe just move this actually. Let's move this up entirely. Yeah, we'll do that. And then we're going to set that to fill. And again, align left and set this to our icon on color. Again, that's going to make it that white color. And then we're going to want to change some of this text here. Okay, so first off, let's set this to like our H6, maybe. And again, set this to our hug, where it's like link your Amex accounts, something like that. And then we might remove the question marks to assume that's what they're going to want to do. We can keep that text as is, and copy in some text here where it's like, we need permission to move forward. Here's why we need access. So with that, one thing we do, I'm also going to get rid of this button and maybe just move this up a little bit. And one thing we can also do here, oops, not sure what happened there, is we can connect these, maybe adjust this to something like 18, keep things nice and snug. There we go. Let's move this up. And let's make sure this is centered. There we go. So you can see how it's kind of coming together a little bit now, where we have sort of like, you click on American Express, it might take you to this page here where it's like, hey, link your American Express account. Here we need permission to move forward. Here's what access we need. It might add some points here around the certain access that we need. Also a button to confirm, or also then to cancel and go back. So let's do that next. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead, bring in some text here, and then set this to like our body, medium, regular, and set this something like your account details. And then set this to our body, and maybe might also want to set this to like our medium. There we go. So we can select both of these elements then. So that's set to hug, that's set to hug. And we can go ahead and simply just paste this inside. Okay, so we're going to copy this 3 times, select these, put each of these into a frame, and then set this to 18. Now, one thing we're also going to want to do here is set those inside a frame, because we don't want to push this down. We can set this to something like 64, or even like 72, or even 112, something like that. So maybe like 108, whatever it is. So it sort of gives you the information, tells you the information that you need in this case. So in this case, it might be your account details, your transactions, and then something like purchase history. I don't know, something like that. And then let's go ahead and let's bring in one of our buttons. Let's paste this in. There we go. Let's copy this, paste this in. And then one thing we can do as well is we can also put these inside of a frame, and then oops, so it's set to hug already. Set this then to fill, and this also to fill, and this to fill. Sorry, I got too many frames here. What that's going to do, again, is going to allow us to put that at the bottom. Now we can put confirm And then one thing we can do as well is see we already have the back button, so that can kind of serve as like a cancel. I don't know if we want another button below it that's more explicit. That's just cancel because again, we want them to confirm their account. So now that we have this out of the way, let me know what you guys think. If you guys like the look of this, I don't think it's a horrible treatment. Again, I think there's definitely some things that we could maybe do to it. And one of them that I'm thinking here, again, maybe just to spruce things up a bit, is similar to how we did with like one of our cards. I almost wonder if we can bring in one of these logos here. And again, this is just me playing around at this point, and then use the absolute positioning tool to like position this in behind, send it back, and then send this to back. I don't know if I'm the biggest fan of that. I almost wonder if we set this to something like 50 and then change this to our plus lighter. Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of that. Honestly, I think it looks a little bit busy. I like to better adjust the gradient, so we'll revert back. But again, if you wanted to explore some type of treatment like that, you'd have the ability to do so. And one thing too is we can even move this up, even just adjust the gap a little bit, something like 96. Give ourselves some more breathing room. There we go. Not half bad in the grand scheme of things, but again, just another treatment for us to explore. Okay. So in this case, let's say that we've selected a bank. We confirm that we want to link the bank. Then we're going to need a confirmation page to say like, hey, this has been linked. Do you want to link another account? Yes, or proceed forward. So let's look at that page next. Okay, well, then we're going to need a page for if this is linked. Okay, so what we can do is we will get rid of these for now. And we can almost extend this down or also extend it up. So take a little bit more of the full page because we're not going to need a lot. So that we can get rid of this. There's no way to go back in this case. So let's swap this out let's search for our check. Figma is so slow. Okay, so my check loaded, and for this, I'm actually going to build out our own component, our own icon for this. Set this to round. And then what we can do is maybe set this to like 20 and then also to 20. And then we can set this to something like 30 by 30. Make it a little bit bigger. We're going to add a stroke, which is going to be a border default subtle. We're going to try that. Set this to round. In this case, let's go with our round radius. And also, we're going to set this to our icon on color because, again, it's going to go in place of this right here. So I think that looks a little bit better than sort of like the default ones that would come out of our icon library. Again, we're using material for this. And then what we can do is let's shrink this down and then just set this to the middle. And almost wondering, playing around some things here. So let's set the round. Yeah, I think we're okay with that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to change this to something like accounts linked, and then just copy in some text here. Sync every account you own. Again, something a little bit more realistic. And now let's go ahead and let's add back in our button here. So we have our button where add another account, just like that, add another account. And then maybe we want to just set this to, where do we want to go? Our transparent. No, I probably don't want to do our transparent. Outline's a little bit too strong. So maybe we swap these, add another account, complete, something like that. I think I might tweak this design a little bit. So we can bring this down very slightly and set a max height here, 475. There we go. So in this case, you can see here, so the flow would be they select their bank, they choose to actually link it. It might open up that application to confirm that they do want that linked. Again, Android usually also standard treatments for that. And then you can see that that account has been linked. Now, one thing I noticed here is we still have like that logo that was sort of the background logo, which was, I think we just removed the vector. It looked like we kept the logo itself. I almost want to play around and see if we can make this work a little bit. Maybe just add some different treatments here. Maybe set this something like 45. So it's kind of faint, but still kind of noticeable. Again, just to offer some treatments. And again, if we had more time, we might spend more time making this like a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? More professional and all that stuff. But again, we're operating on a low timeline here. So set this maybe something like 15. So it's very faint. And I think what that does is sort of gives us that nice background effect. Offers some texture to it. Maybe we want to match that as well. So set that. It's like our 15. Yeah, at least it adds like some sort of background texture to it. It's not just like a boring gradient. And I think that looks half decent. Okay, so our onboarding is coming a long way. And I think I might go back and tweak this page a little bit later on. So we can see how our onboarding is coming together now. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, so we can link our accounts. Now, one thing we want to look at is actually choosing the card that our client's going to want. So want to play around with an experience where the user can choose their card. Maybe it's the last step. So after they link their accounts, you know that they're serious, they can go ahead and choose their card, whatever. So for this, maybe I'm just going to bring in one of these pages here. I don't know how we're going to design it. I like this Revolut experience. We don't want to do it exactly as Revolut does because that's not what we do. So let's go ahead and just add back in that padding. Oops, that padding here, 64. Let's go ahead and just paste in a card, play around with it. So again, we don't want to do exactly as Revolut does. So let's go ahead and just scale this down. Again, I should have set up proper scaling properties on our card, but forgive me. Remove something like choose a card. Now, one thing as well that I kind of like is how Revolut, again, I'm just adding absolute positioning here for now to play around and sort of identify the sort of look and feel that we're going for. And then what we're going to do is we're going to bring out all these elements once we identify the look and feel and actually add in the prototype interaction. So as you swipe, the card's going to change because, again, that looks really good in an interview or also just for our own projects as well. So maybe if this one becomes like that purple, and maybe we copy this and paste it on that the left-hand side. Maybe this one becomes like a pink. Again, I like how Revolut does this. We don't want to copy exactly what Revolut does. We do want to add our own twist onto things. Again, whether we think it's the right approach or not. And then maybe we have something below where this is where we can get into metal. I do like that dot that they have in the middle. So maybe we can just copy this, call this metal black, and select both of these and set this to our large, regular, medium, regular, medium. Yeah, there we go. And let's add some auto layout in between. We can align these in the center, and we can just go ahead and add in that dot. I do kind of like that. Set this to our surface default, and that's too small. It's just like 4 by 4. There we go. So it's very subtle, and we can just paste this in between. And we can just align that in the middle to something like 8. It's nice and tight. I just kind of like that dot. Something like metal black might even be too big. We can set this to like 3 by 3. There we go. And then we have some text. And for this one, we might want to set it to like that small regular. I think it's coming along relatively well. So you can choose a card. We have our button down here. And then so let's add in some. I'm trying to think what else might work here. Is again, we're going to want to build these out as well. So for this, I'm actually just going to go ahead add in a frame. And that said it's like 24 by 24 for now. 36 by 36. 36 by 36 for now. We're going to add a fill, which is going to be our surface default. And 36 by 36, not 36 by 26. Set the radius to 1024. And then what we're going to do is we're going to, just trying to think here, let's create the component of this actually. And then on that component, what we're going to do is we're going to add in a border on the outside. It's around 2 pixels away, 2 pixels, and set this to our focus. There we go. And then what we can do is just position it around our frame here. Oops, what happened? Sorry, forgive me for that. Turn clip content off. There we go. And let's drop that fill, add in that stroke that we just did, our focus, border, 2 pixels, and then also that focus color. There we go. And just try to get it 2 pixels on either side. Again, try to just mimic what Revolut did because I did really like that treatment. Again, we can come back and play around with it. I think that's fine in the grand scheme of things. So we're going to call this maybe just our color. And then let's copy and then just paste it in here. Again, just building the framework of things. And I think that came out relatively okay. So let's select these, add some auto layout here. We might want to shrink it even a little bit. Maybe if we add 4 and position this in the middle. Yeah, I just think that's a little bit too big. So I almost want, if we do shrink it down to like that 24 by that 24, and then just move that focus down. Or just condense it a little bit. There we go. This is the hard part of getting it scaling. 32 by 32. There we go. Now it's looking better. Yeah, I think that smaller size is a little bit better in the grand scheme of things. And one thing we can even do as well is add some auto layout here and then set some auto layout there. And one thing we can also do is just add some additional gap or set this like 64 where it kind of falls in the center to take up a lot of that white space. So I'm kind of happy with this approach. Again, for the short time that we have playing around with this, I think it looks half decent. But now let's go ahead. Let's bring in that swipe interaction, similar to how Revolut does where user can actually just toggle between a lot of those cards. So the first thing that we're going to need to do here is we're going to need to create some different variants. So for this, we need to create variants for this if it's selected versus not selected. So we're going to draw like our selected option is going to have that border similar to what Revolut did. Okay. So with that, then is we're going to add different colors here. We can just swap them out for just color match for now. What this one is, and again, same thing here. And I don't think we have a focus for that color. So I'm just going to violate it and copy the color code for now. Forgive me. And we're going to do this for this one here, this color as well. And then maybe you might also just, again, we should be using our styles for this. But actually, you know what? We're just going to go with our rows and set this to like our 400. There we go. And also our rows 400. And then also, again, just for consistency, our purple. I don't think we have a purple in this color, actually. Anyways, we're just going to continue on. And then this one, we might go with like a green. Oh, that green's really harsh. We might go with like a teal 400 or teal 400. There we go. So we sort of have some different options of cards, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to bring these down. Actually, one thing we also want is actually to create another card for these as well. So we can bring in another card interaction, another card color here. And again, we're going to set that to like teal. Was it our teal 400? There we go. Doesn't look half bad. And again, we need to make sure that our naming is right. So these here could be our teal. And then we have some miscellaneous items here. So these here are our, what do we call this? These are our name. And then these here are our basic. Again, just for consistency purposes, let's adjust that. So now what we can do, so we have our teal, right? So what we can do now is we can bring in each of these. So we think about similar to how Revolut does it is, you know, the ones that don't have that outline are not selected. So we can set this to maybe like 12 or maybe 24 or 18, find some happy medium. And then what we can do actually is we can then copy this in. Sorry, I'm going to give ourselves some space here. So again, we're just recreating the design that we have here. So let's bring in the text. Paste. There we go. So select these together, and then we're going to select these on either side. Okay. So have one on either side. So then we can group these in an auto layout. And one thing we're going to want is if you look at how wide the frame is, we're going to want to extend this in. If we extend in this frame here, there we go. So it's aligns, and then we're just going to move it back in the middle. So sorry, it might be hard to see with it overlapping on the designs. So what that's going to allow us to do is we can still put this into the frame, but the frame itself is only going to follow this. These are going to fall outside the frame, if that makes sense. It's going to allow us to like introduce that swiping action. So we have this set up. Again, if we think about what this is, this one here might be our teal, and then this one here might be that purple. Because again, if you swipe right, you're going to go to the purple, then you're going to go to the rose, and then you're going to go to the teal, then you're going to go to the black. Okay. So we have our initial setup out of the way. Now let's look at creating components to this in order to add the necessary interactions. Okay, so now what we're going to do, we're going to group these together, okay? And then we're going to create the component of these. Now we're going to move this all the way up. Let's get this out of the way here so we don't lose focus on our end mission. And let's go ahead and add a variant now. So let's extend this out. And one thing we're going to do here as well is just simply move these side by side. Okay, so if this is our first, and this here is going to be our second. So what we're going to do, we're going to change this to our purple. We're going to change this to our purple, and we're going to change this one to our pink, and we're going to change this one to our black. Oops. or gray, sorry. And then we're going to set this one as the one that is selected, but it looks like we have a naming issue here. So sorry about that. So we're going to have type and then just color, variant color. So this is going to be our dark, our gray, or let's call it our black. This is our purple. Purple. This is our rose. This here is our teal. And we're going to have a selected and then an unselected. There you go. So that should solve our issues. Yeah, nothing overlapping, so we're good. Okay, so if we think about it, it's almost like swiping right in an instant. So this here is going to become our selected, and then this here is going to become our unselected. We're swiping through these items. Then what we can do is call this our metal purple. And again, we can add some subtext a little bit later on. Now, one thing I want to do is I want to test out this interaction. So let's pause the video here and then test the interaction. Okay, so now let's go ahead. Let's add in some interactions here. So, oops, that's not what I wanted to go. I want to go to the full frame. So if we go to this frame here, now what a lot of designers tend to do here, okay, so what they do on drag, change to, and then just move in one direction. Now, the issue with that, I'm going to show you a trick here that it takes a lot of designers to figure out, is if you do just the basic interactions, is let's copy this, bring this down, and then just get rid of the old elements here of us just laying out the frame. Get rid of this, get rid of this, and then just paste this in as is. There we go, something like that. So if we go ahead and we close this, and if we present this now, look what's going to happen is, see how the elements are like overlapping each other? We want to avoid that. That's kind of an awkward experience. So what we're going to do is we're going to change this from on drag. It's going to add a smart animate. And what that's going to do is going to recognize the matching layers, and it's no longer going to see how it's like a little bit more nice and fluid now, where things change a little bit easier. Again, if we had more time, one thing we would probably do is we'd actually, what's the word that I'm looking for? Like spend time customizing that smart animate to get the nice effect where it shows the cards like sliding. But again, this is probably going to be a 2-hour tutorial already. So that's something I might launch in a future episode, like tips on advanced prototyping and things like that. So be sure to subscribe for that. So now that we have that initial item out of the way, let's go ahead and add the additional variants here. So let's go ahead and add in our other items here. Now, there's one thing that I would like to cover here, is that if we look at our interactions, it doesn't specify the direction that we're dragging things, especially if we're using a smart animate. So on drag, we can't change the direction that we're dragging to. We can do that with like touch down, touch up, but not drag left, drag right. Okay. So, and because we can't have two drags on the same item, because again, we can't specify which route that they're coming from, in the purposes of our prototype itself, we're just going to only have one drag. Okay. So we're going to remove the ability to drag the other way and only have the ability to drag right in this case. So here, what we can do now is we can set this to our rows. And if you have any questions on that, just drop them below and I'll get back to you. And then this here is going to become our purple. And then this here should be our selected. And then this here is our unselected. There we go. And this one here is going to become our teal. This one's going to become our gray, and this one's going to become our purple. This is our rose, sorry. Our rose, or pink, sorry, I should get the naming down. And then this one here is going to become our selected, and then this one here is going to become our unselected. And again, if you're building this for a portfolio, like no one's really going to care. An interviewer is not going to be like, oh, you didn't do the inverse of it where you can swipe both ways, okay? So we can set this to on drag. And then we can set this to our on drag. And then when this one swipes, it's going to revert back to this one here, which is going to be our on drag. So let's go ahead. Let's test this out. So I can swipe through all the different elements now. One thing we still are going to want to do is, again, clean up the copy, but less critical. Change this to like our rose, and then this one to our teal. And we can add custom descriptions here for each of them if we'd want as well. Okay, so now we have this nice choose your card page with all these different interactions for us. The last piece of the puzzle here would be sort of a loading page. So one thing we're actually gonna do is bring this in. So sort of like a loading your experience type thing is, let's send this to the back. Sorry, I don't know why it's still floating around there. So we can build our loading page. Come on, there we go. It's something like building your experience. Now, building your experience, hang tight. This could take a couple moments, a couple seconds. There we go. Now, one thing that's always nice to do is actually like build in this little interaction of things here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set these to our surface defaults, our surface on color. Sorry, or no, we'll go with default for now because on a white background, but oops, don't know what I did there. What we're going to do, let's add some auto layout here. And we're just going to add in just a little loading interaction, okay? Where one is going to get bigger than the other just to show like the system's thinking. And you can play around with this as much as you want to. One thing I'm going to actually experiment with is if we actually just set these to add a stroke. We then set this to our border defaults. For now, okay, so we're going to go ahead, set this to like 8 pixels, and we're going to create the component of this. So one thing we're going to do here is we're going to add in these different interactions. So one here, again, I added a border. I want to experiment with this treatment, but I might just add the fill back in. Anyways, it's me playing around. And what we're going to do here, where it's like set not on tap, but like an after delay, and set it really quickly to like 25 milliseconds. And then this one to the same thing. God, so weird. After delay, 25 milliseconds. And then after delay, 25 milliseconds. And then after delay, I'm just leaving the smart animate in. Just want to see what it comes back with. And then 25 milliseconds. And then after delay, we're going to reset to this one up here. And then again, after delay, God, I hate these windows sometimes. It's going to be set to like 25 milliseconds. Okay. So what we're going to do, we're going to copy this and then paste this in here. So it's like a little loading screen. Oops. There we go. Like a little loading screen almost. Sure shows that you're thinking. And one thing we can do is just set this to our each one that's loading to, so all like the big ones to like our border default. Sort of show it like almost like it's thinking, gives a nice treatment to it. So border defaults, and then our border defaults. And now if we go ahead, let's close this and then just play this. So it just shows that the system's thinking. Just something cool that you can do for like a little loading effect. Yeah, see how it's like almost like loading there? I think that looks pretty cool. I don't know about you. But again, you can play around with that as much as you want to. It's a really nice hack and something almost like flex in an interview. So we see something like 48. Again, give ourselves a little bit of spacing. I think that even looks even better. So beautiful. There we have our onboarding screens all done. Okay, so now let's go ahead and let's look at like a banking dashboard. Again, start looking at some ideas here of some applications or like things that we can steal. Not steal, but you know what I mean. I kind of like this, how this is nice here. Is this sort of like some differentiation at the top. I also do like the clean look of this. I really like the transactions here, actually. I think the transactions here are kind of nice. I think I'm just scrolling through. That card's also a pretty nice treatment. Copilot. This is nice. This is a common treatment that I've seen a lot in banking, is where you have the ability to make a slide through like your dashboard, your accounts and things like that. It's a pretty common treatment that you do see around. And again, even there too, you sort of have the transactions view of what that looks like. So I'm almost wondering if maybe we start out with just a dashboard. We don't look at any of the other pages. And it looks like sort of the first one that we see tends to be pretty popular as accounts, because I guess that's what people do care about most. So again, just scrolling through, see if there's any inspiration that I like. Ooh, the tab view is kind of nice. Ooh, I also do really like the colors here. If you think about like the treatment that we were using, again, at times, it sort of had like that gradient background. I think this could be a nice treatment to maybe put some type of dollar value there, but I'm not too sure yet. I think we got enough to go off of for now. I might pause the video and just keep scrolling and see if anything else jumps out at me. But again, I want to take you guys on this initial journey. So yeah, let's keep moving forward. Okay, so I have some initial screens highlighted here. Again, just from the inspiration that we took, there's a couple things I want to highlight that we're going to go through that really take a lot of inspiration from. Now, one thing I'd like to preface is that as we build up the dashboard and some of the subsequent pages, maybe we might transition away from sort of this background look here, right? Now, you might be wondering why didn't I scope that out before? And the reason being is I don't think it's fair for everyone here for me to build this UI in 2 hours that and realistically took me 2 or 3 days to actually build. Okay, that's not how I want you to feel. Because if I spend like 2 hours building up this amazing application, everyone's going to think, oh, well, why can't I do that too? Right. So I'm building these designs with you guys on the fly. I want you guys to see the mistakes that I make, how I approach different problems, how I approach different UIs to spin up something relatively half decent in just a couple hours. Okay. So just some inspiration that we took here. So it looks like what Revolut and Copilot do is they have sort of this there's sort of this top navigation element, sort of this hierarchy, slidable, almost like tabs that control the pages. And what that does, it almost removes the need for the bottom navigation. I really don't want to force a bottom navigation if it's not needed. So using this kind of treatment here, I almost wonder if we can get rid of that bottom nav. I also really do like this cards treatment as well, for sort of your most popular cards that you might have linked to the accounts. Also too, looking at, I do like some of the quick actions here. I almost if we can maybe use these for sort of a different purpose, like maybe to pay a bill or something like that, have these on the dashboard. And then also, again, having sort of like whatever your value is across all the cards or banks that you've linked somewhere at the top right on that dashboard. So that's some initial inspiration that we're going to take. Now let's go ahead again with all that preamble over. Let's start building up those actual pages. What we're going to do now is we're going to bring down this page here. And the reason why I'm bringing down this page is we already have this icon here that we can use for sort of the top navigation that might have like a menu. Okay. So what we're going to do to start is let's just get rid of this background because I don't want to try to force a design into that background. Let's change these to our caption and our heading. And again, the reason I remove that again is just so I don't want to feel as if I need to use that background treatment if it doesn't work with where my design is heading. Okay. So then what we can do is just set this to our defaults and our defaults. And again, I built out this library in a video, also available for free, but a lot of the components that you're going to be using are also available online on UI Collective Academy. But anyways, let's continue. So again, let's start off with the top here. So before we get into the top navigation, looks like we still have some element bleeding there. Okay. Let's focus on sort of these widgets here, getting our navigation down pat. Move my video bar. And what we're going to do is let's just say, like, call this like our summary or something. I don't know. Set this to our body small, regular, add some auto layout, then adjust. This is like 4, and this is like maybe 8. I'm going to play around with it. And because we're on sort of this darker background for now, let's add a surface defaults and then add a stroke. So border default subtle, and then a radius in this case, which would be 1024. Let's call this like our navigation. And now let's create the component of this. And then what we're going to do for the one that's not selected, we're just going to maybe remove the background and also the border. And let's see what that looks like. So we have summary, and then we have another one here. So maybe this is something like transactions. Sure. Then you might have a page for card. Then you might have a page for billing. I don't know, just winging it on the fly here. And now let's group those in an auto layout and then position them along the top there. Now, one thing we can do is we can also just ungroup this and move this to the top and just set this to something like 24 for now. Now, I don't think that's that half bad, but unlike our onboarding pages, we might want things to be a little bit tighter because we have less content. I almost wonder if we can extend out the padding to something like 18 to give ourselves lots of breathing room. And I think that works. Maybe we add one more for just, I don't even know, transactions, card, billing, history. I have no idea. We'll come back to that top nav, but I think it's looking half decent. So if I just get rid of some of these elements that we don't need and maybe left align this text through where we might have a value or something. So what we can do now that we have this out of the way, and I think it's looking kind of clean already, is let's focus on this top bar. So what we can do is let's extend these elements out, because maybe we want like a menu or something here. And then maybe we also want like a bell, like a notification, something like that. I think it's looking good. But if we have like an account value here, let's say like 1 million, and maybe if we even condense these in just to see a realistic view of what this might look like, I think we're missing something here. So I wonder if we can go into, I was already searching our badge. Perfect. I wonder if we can go into our badge component. And again, all these components are super easy to build. And again, I show you how to build this component. It's a little bit more of a complex one in UI Collective Academy. I wonder if we set this to our success, and then set our modifier to the defaults, and then set this to the extra small, and then maybe like some type of promotion where it's like earn $100. I think that works. So if we group these together, set this to something like 12, and then right align that, I think it fills up our space pretty well. So I'm kind of like where we're going with this navigation bar and also this top banner as well. But now let's focus on the rest of the page, predominantly like what that value is for summary across all of our credit cards. Okay, so the top elements out of the way, sort of that foundation. Let's go ahead and maybe just start with our dollar value. So maybe if we set this to something like an H5, I think that's fine. Maybe add like a decimal. So first, let's make this a realistic number, like 10,898.9.86, something like that. Now, I almost wonder if what we can do is set this to like our placeholder and also our decimal to the placeholder as well. Kind of offers like a little bit of a different treatment. The placeholder value might be a little bit too tough, but if we go with something like a caption, it might just offer. I actually don't mind that. Okay. And then we can call this like your collective summary. I have no idea. Your collective summary. And we can set this something like a hug. And I think that's coming along. Again, maybe if you just connect to like different bank accounts or something. I have no idea. Then we can set this to something like an info. There we go. And if we set this like around, if we go maybe like a 20, about like a 20, it's not half bad. Yeah, so I think it's good that we can play around with it. So let's set this aligned, set this to something like 8. And I don't like it when it's rounded. And again, sort of the collective summary is maybe you might want like a description as to all the different cards that this is connected to. I have no idea. I'm just really just thinking on the fly here. Don't think it's that half bad. So let's maybe tighten this up a little bit. So then we have, okay, so you have your collected summary. Let's get rid of this. I think that looks pretty good. I almost wonder if this tooltip is hit. What it does is sort of brings up a modal from the bottom, explaining more about this number, how it's calculated. We'll come back to that a little bit later, but I want to move down the rest of the page here. And I think where we could probably start is something like this. So where we have our cards. So let's go ahead and let's look at that next. So now what I really do like is I really like this, where it's almost you can click into the different cards, and we're going to get to what that card index page might look like. So what I've done is I've just copied in images here. So we have 2 of the cards, and I added in just an Amex card as well, just for some differentiation. We're just actually just going to like kind of just copy this as is, if I'm honest, because I really do like it. So what we can do is you can also you can create the component of these if you want, but we're not going to roll with that for now. So let's just bring in some text here. There we go. And maybe, sorry, this is bothering me. I'm just going to set this maybe to our outlined, a little bit cleaner. So maybe we have like collective card. Maybe set this to like our body, small, regular. Set this to our body. And then maybe we can again set this like a semi bold, and then beneath it we might have like our medium. And this here, then we have the dollar value, so like 791, and set this to our placeholder, so it's like a completely different color. So let's go ahead, wrap these in an auto layout. Now, what we can do actually is maybe to save ourselves a little bit of time. Let's see if we can grab any of the widgets above. Doesn't look like we can. But life hack for us. Maybe if we just add a quick fill to this and then bring this inside, we can start to compare sizing. Again, so we already have like that auto layouts. So if we set this to 12 and also 12, again, this is way too big as is. So I think we can maybe just shrink this down a bit. set that, of course, to the middle. We can also maybe even shrink this text size as well, which like a it's going to be really small, but like a 12 medium. I think that's okay. Again, usually you don't want to go text this small, but again, we're playing around with it. And then maybe we can go with an extra small medium, and we can just adjust the spacing here to something like 2 pixels. And I think that's fine, maybe like 12 pixels. So first off, let's go ahead. Let's add in a radius here around this outside. And let's also add in a stroke, which is going to be like our border, default subtle. And let's also add 12 pixels on the bottom as well. And let's just see if we can fit 3 in here. Set this. Oops, looks like we have an extra layer here on group. Yeah, I think we can fit 3 pretty snug. So that's good. But now what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to put something above it where it's cards, your cards, or just maybe just cards. And again, we can probably set this one pretty small as well. Set that's like our small regular, and then also set this to our body. And then maybe if we can just bring this in, or let's just go and look for our chevron. Let's pull this in. I know this is a chevron left, but I'm just going to rotate it around because I am a rule breaker. Again, you should always be consistent with the sizes of your icons, and also the naming as well. Again, but just for speed of time, because Figma's slow to load icons, I'm just going to rotate this for now. So sue me if you want. So let's go ahead and maybe just align that way. Doesn't look half bad. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good in the grand scheme of things. So what we're going to do is let's just go ahead and just paste in this. I can see this is set to 75. So 75, we can get rid of this one. And then also our Amex as well. We can maybe just paste in here. So set this to something like 75 and move up 75, and then American or Amex. There we go. And sorry, it's kind of bothering me a bit. Yeah, we'll align it right that way. And also what we're going to do is we're going to set this to like our medium. Something like that, where you have maybe like the most visited cards that you can click into, which would open up sort of the index page for that card. So I think this is coming along pretty well. One thing I also want to add is if we think about like a credit card, like a banking application, is I really care about like the transactions, see if anything's fraudulent, what subscription did I not cancel, and also maybe the ability to pay a bill right away. So let's focus on those elements next. And again, I think a lot of these elements that we're using, we can transfer to the other pages to maintain that similar look. So as I mentioned, probably the thing that I would care most about is my transactions, like what's coming in and out of my account. So I think maybe we can have like an arrow upward. And let's start off trying to think how we might want to lay this out. So let's maybe start off, and icons on their own are boring. So if you always put an icon inside of a round circle, it always spruces up just a little bit. So we can set this like our border default subtle. So think about this, maybe this is a transaction where like your account value, your credit card value is going like up or down. And there's a couple different ways you can look at it or how you want to structure the app. If it's only credit cards stuff, unless it's like a refund, things are probably only coming out of your account. But maybe just if it's a bank account, maybe we might also want to have something where the account value goes down, the account value goes up, and there's also like it's a return. So it's like almost like a swap. So let's go ahead and just maybe set this to something like what's something I buy a lot of, where it's like coffee. Set this to our text body, and then let's set this to maybe like our semi-bold, too large. Let's set it to, come on, Figma. Set it to our body medium semi-bold. And I think that's coming along. And then maybe we can put the date. So, I don't know, like June 1. I know that was last week. So, but we can then set this to our small regular. And actually, there's one treatment that we had earlier that I kind of liked, which is this one right here. So maybe we actually just copy this entirely. There we go. So let's copy this and maybe just bring it down. And then we can paste it beneath. There we go. Again, left align that. So we sort of have May 15th, paid, and set these to like maybe our placeholder, it's a little bit of smaller value. Maybe we have the date afterwards. So maybe it's like a pending charge. So I can see if this one's been paid. And we can go ahead and group these, set these something like 2. And then what we can do here is maybe just add some auto layout here and set this something like 14. And then we can also go ahead, actually, before we do that, let's ungroup that. And maybe we can have sort of the dollar value where it's like 14.82. Again, it's the price of coffee these days in Toronto anyway. But okay, so let's group these in an auto layout. Then let's group this together and set this to fill. There we go. So I'm picturing we sort of have sort of this transaction bar here where it goes up. So fill, we have that transaction where the account goes, in this case, it'd probably go down. I don't know, something like that. We can play around with it. Again, what you can also do is if you want to introduce different icons here, it can be like an arrow down, down, and then sort of like the account value is going up or down. And then you can also do like arrow swap. I wonder if we have like an arrow swap icon. We're sure showing the 2. So maybe something's been like returned or something like that. But again, you can play around with it. Really up to you. I'm just sort of helping you get the framework down. So what we can do, we can maybe create the component of this and maybe call this like our transaction item. And we're going to want a heading here as well to separate out the transactions. So let's bring this down. I think this might be like an H6 medium. We call this transactions. Oops, sorry, transaction item. And oh God, I really can't type today. Transaction item. There we go. So we can get rid of these 2. And then we have all our transactions beneath that. So let's go ahead, paste this in. That's not right. This would be in here. And then this should also be in here. We can set this to fill. Set this to fill. There we go. Problem solved. And we can group these in an auto layout and then increase sort of the gap of these to something like 24. Again, if we have more time, you might go through and make sure that everything is a little bit more consistent, but we don't have a ton of time for that right now. Maybe we want to set this even to like our body large, semi-bold. So it's kind of tight. I think that's pretty good. So now we can add like all our different transactions here. So you can see how this is really coming together. Now, again, there's a couple of things that I feel are missing. Maybe we might want some type of filter on the transactions. If you're searching for something specifically, so you don't need to navigate to the transactions page. And again, I think we're just missing some type of CTA on this page, whether it's like a pay bill, something like that. So let's explore some different treatments for this homepage, leveraging those 2 ideas. So I want to start off with the idea of the CTAs. Now, one thing I actually like is I like this treatment here. We have the arrows. Maybe just bring in some text here and then just move it in the center and then set this to hug. See, that I like because it's kind of like a chill button, a little bit different. It's not as in your face type of thing. So we maybe do something like pay bill. And then instead of the arrow, maybe what we can do is we can have, let's see what comes up with pay. Pay bill doesn't look so bad. So let's just go ahead. Let's create the component of this actually, in case we want to change the design, and I'll just paste it in. And now let's try it up there. But first off, let's play around with what else we might need. So a pay bill, maybe transfer funds. Maybe you can transfer amounts in between different cards. I think that text is a little bit too strong. So if we set that to something like a medium, I think that looks a little bit better. And I wonder if we can swap this out for something like transfer swap. So you search for like a swap. So swap horizontal. So transfer funds, pay bill, and then maybe we're running out of space here. So maybe we actually just get rid of this entirely. And then we move this on the right. So you might have some type of option where you can like download your bill or something like that. So set this to round. Let's set this to fill. And then let's just extend this out. So I don't like it when we have that much space in between. I almost wonder if we can increase the padding, set this to like 14, except for this one. Let's just hard code this one to 12. 44, there we go. And set that in the center. And now with that extended padding, maybe we can just move that out a little bit so it goes side to side. I don't think that's that half bad, Because if we think about it, we have our navigation along the top. We have the summary of what we need to do. We can pay the bill. We can transfer funds. We can download the statement for this. Then we can go into our most used cards. Then we can also go into our transactions as well. See what's coming in and out of our account or being applied to our cards. Now, one thing, I wonder if we can just decrease the spacing here a little bit to something like 16. I think that looks a little bit tighter already. Again, let me know what you think. And we can call this maybe just like a button. I know we already have button components, but again, we're building things on the fly here. And maybe if we do the same thing here, so this is something like 18, keep things nice and tight. I think that's okay. Now, with our transactions, now I'm thinking about it. I know I mentioned we might want to have the option to filter, but maybe if on the dashboard, you don't really want a ton of like these more complex filtering and searches, that might be useful for something like a transactions page. So I wonder if maybe we leave this as is for now, and then we come back to the when we build the transactions page next. That's where we get to some of those advanced filtering and like search. And one thing I want to experiment as well, because this might inform how we tweak our onboarding once we've got to this point, is just paste this in behind. And let's just play around with this here real quick. Again, we're exploring as we go. And this is sort of my process I go through whenever I'm designing on the fly. So you guys can see it as well, or on color. And then this is going to become our heading. Not half bad, but I think it's kind of forcing it a little bit. So again, to each their own. I don't know if I'm a huge fan of that. We might come back to it later, but I kind of like sort of this clean, sort of white, dark gray or light gray look for now. So I think our dashboard's in a half decent space for now. Other things too, maybe you just want to set this to like 16 by 16, keep it nice and sort of tight, tucked away, so we can pay bill, transfer funds, see our most popular cards, click this to go to all our other cards. Clicking one of these cards might take us to that card page with all the specific transactions and details of that specific card. We have our transactions here. Maybe if we set this to like a medium, already a little bit softer, and maybe we can even go one set this to our body medium. No, too small. Let's revert back. So I think we're in some decent shape. Again, we might come back and change this, but there's in just a couple minutes is a half decent dashboard. So next, let's look at our transactions page, then our card page, and we'll see what other pages we want to build. So before we move on to transactions real quick, I changed my mind. Let's play around. Maybe if we make this like a semi-bold or something. Yeah, I think it's a little bit cleaner. And then I just want to check a couple things here. This looks like we have some weird padding at the top there. So we just remove that. I think it makes things a little bit tighter. Maybe if you want to add some type of padding back where it's just like a 4. There we go. I didn't think we needed that much space. Okay, perfect. So let's go ahead. Let's add these to our components down below. Wherever, just throw them down here. Over on this side. And now let's go ahead and let's focus on our transactions page. There's a second page in the list. I think we might only get through 3 or 4 of these. Again, we got to stop this video at some point. If you want more, feel free to comment below. So we go into our transactions now. So with our transactions, what we can do, we can get rid of this. I'm trying to think here what we might want is we can go ahead and copy in our search bar. Do we have a search bar? Yeah, we have a search bar here. We can copy in the same search bar that we used. So let's paste this in. And then, so we have our transactions. And I almost wonder if we want to filter these by date. So it'd be like May 14th, 2025. And then we might have 4 transactions. And then we might have it duplicated and it's like May 13th, where we can add some space in between these and set this to like 18 or so. I think it's coming along. I don't think we would really need the use case of those buttons anymore, but what we would need is some type of like heading for like transactions. If we set this to maybe our H5 medium and also our heading, there we go. I don't think that's that half bad. There's a couple things I think we can do to tidy this up is if we set this to maybe like our medium regular or maybe medium, I think that does sort of gives us a little bit more room. And also too, we can even extend this out. Sorry, I'm adding a ton of just different frames here. Give ourselves a little bit of breathing room. So we have transactions, we have the ability to search. Maybe we want to have like some filters. So I almost wonder if we just bring in sort of just some basic text here, just copy this in. So just bring in some text and have this like filter by, or maybe we'll use the one below it or whatever. It doesn't really matter. Set this to like our placeholder or maybe our caption. And let's search for our filter. See what we have. So we have our filter. So filter by, then we can group these together. Oops. There we go. And set this to hug. So we can have like some type of filter here. Paste that in. We got an unnecessary number of frames here, so forgive me for that. And then we can go ahead, set that, and then just push that over to the side. So when we have our transactions page here, I don't know where that came from, so we have all the different, so we have May 13th, May 14th, May 14th, May 13th, May 12th. So we have all the different transactions that we can filter between. So I don't think it's that half bad. Again, we're not going for the most complex design in the world. Something that's kind of simple and clean. So transactions filter. Maybe if we even just increase the space here, something like 24, and increase the space of these to also 24, even 36 as well. That might help break things up a bit. I don't think 36 maybe aggressive. We'll go 24. There we go. So we see all the different transactions that we have. We might be able to filter across some of the different cards as well if we even wanted to. So I think it's a half decent transactions page. Might come back, tweak it, but let's move forward to the cards to the card page, for now. So now let's focus on the cards pages. Actually, before we do that, maybe I want to make this a little bit bigger, actually. Sorry, it's me getting picky. I just think that's a little bit better. Okay, so let's set that to our H5, actually. Medium, again, so then we're going to change this to something like cards. Again, I should have made a component of this navigation itself. So forgive me for that. So maybe one thing we're going to do, again, just for best practice, is actually create the component of this and then bring this down, just in case we do decide to tweak that navigation. We can do so a little bit later, relatively easily. There we go. So for this one, this is going to be our selected. I think I should name the variants as well. Again, I'm a rule breaker. But let's paste this in. There we go. Transactions, then we have our cards, okay? So transactions, and then our cards. Okay, so here we have our cards. So for our cards, a design that I really like is the Apple Wallet. So one thing we might want to do is just like use the images for now that we had before. So we had each of these and also the Amex as well. What we can do is we can add these in auto layout frame and then just bring these inside. Actually, but first, one thing before we do that is maybe just make these way bigger. So there we go. And now what we're going to do, let's add these in the auto layout frame and then set them to like -120. What that's going to do is going to create, by setting the gap to a negative, it's going to overlap those elements. So there we go. And then we can get rid of this. Maybe even want to overlap them just a little bit more. Also set them to fill. And then -150, where you can sort of sort between all of the different cards that you might have. You might have a Visa, you might have a whatever. And then maybe where we have, again, I don't know if it's a use case where someone would have like 15 different cards. Again, even my experience in banking was never really a use case. So maybe if we just leave these out for now, but maybe what we want to do is bring in some type of CTA here just for the bottom, where it's link new card, or add new card. I'll go link new card. And let's add an icon there as well. So I don't know why that's in a frame. Sorry, too many frames floating around. And set this to like a plus. Figma super slow. All right, guess we're not going to add a plus. We're going to go ahead and set this to fill and also set these to fill. And what this is going to do is going to put that to the bottom, and we can go ahead and just get rid of that and then left align that. Actually, before we get rid of that, one thing we might want to try is actually just link new card. And if we get rid of this, no, I like it better at the bottom. So we're just going to get rid of this here. So then we have all of our cards. Come on. Sorry, too many frames floating around. There we go. So we have our cards you could sort through. You also have the ability to link a new card. So now let's go ahead and try to search for our plus again. And after about 10 minutes of waiting, I was finally able to add my plus. And maybe if we make this a little bit more personal, like my cards or something, I don't think that's that half bad. You might want to play around with the treatment here of like the bottom button. Someone might think that this is a little bit too bulky. I tend to agree with them in that case. Maybe if we set this to like our subtle button where it's like link new card, it almost blends in a little bit too much. So there you go with our outline. No, I don't. I like that even less. So maybe we'll just set that to that there for now. But again, you might want to play around with it a little bit. Okay. But now that we have this My Cards page out of the way, one thing we're also going to want to do is look at a page where if we were to click into one of these cards, showing details of the cards, transactions of this card specifically, so on and so forth. Okay. So as I said, we mentioned, we're going to want a page if we were to click into one of these cards itself. Okay. So let's go ahead and maybe let's remove all the cards except one. And let's get rid of this as well for now. Again, we might bring that back. Now, one thing I'm going to go ahead and bring back in is just this arrow here. Again, I'm not going to try to search for another icon, given how slow it is. So we're just going to use one that's already there before. And we can then go ahead and remove that. Because again, if I'm coming from this page, that might take me, back to the home page, back to wherever page I came from, whether it's here or that dashboard page. And then I'm also going to want to bring in some text. So just copy some text, bring it in, and set this to MX7879. And let's center that. Now, if we align it across, what that does is going to put that on the right hand side, but we want it in the center. So what you can do, you can copy one of these icons and then simply just remove the icon itself. So that's always then going to be in the center itself. So what we can do, we can then just remove that button at the bottom. And I almost wonder if we can use a lot of these elements that we used before. So including this top navigation, maybe these buttons here, and maybe these transaction pages to populate the bottom here. So right away, I almost wonder if we can bring in this element here and then, paste it inside. Oh, come on. Why are my layers all messed up here? So D should be in a frame. Oh, sorry. This is still set to -150 from the cards. Forgive me. So we can have something like card balance. Card balance, we might just adjust this number as well. So like 27289 27. So we have our card balance here. Now I almost wonder what it might look like if we put this at the top. Not half bad. Okay. So let's then take this and let's also move this, because again, we can pay just this bill if we want to. And we might also bring in sort of this top nav. But what we're going to do, we're actually going to detach it, because for our top nav, what we might just have are just transactions. What else might we have? I'm trying to think here. Like documents and like card details, or documents or statements, maybe. Statements, and then maybe card details. So you might only have 3 here for these items. You might not have other ones. So you have your, I almost wonder if we move this above even. I think it's kind of just in the way then, the American Express. Let's maybe move this up. I think it's more of a standard treatment that you might see, but I'm a rule breaker, so I'm going to move this here. So you have your card balance, you can pay the bill, you can transfer your funds, and you have your transactions. So what we could maybe do is just take this and put it below. So we have all of our transactions. Maybe we can get rid of some of these. And then it's also maybe just bring in the search bar too. See what that's like. So there we go. So we have our transactions for each day. We have our statements. We have our card details. It's not a half bad page. Again, I can make the argument where it's a little bit of a different treatment. We have your card balance here, you have the image, but I think the more standard treatment that you might see is something like this. So let's maybe go ahead and just clean this up a bit. So something like 14. And then maybe what we want to do actually is maybe just give ourselves a little breathing room from the item above it. Set that to 24. Maybe set this all to 24, except all these. And maybe set these to 24. No, that's kind of ugly. Yeah, we'll leave that as is for now. Again, I'm not too sure if I'm a big fan of this actually. So let's maybe go. Sorry, this is just me being picky. Set that to 18, where you can pay bill, you can transfer your funds, or you can download a statement. Now, you can make the argument here that this sort of navigation and these buttons are almost too close together. So what you might want to try is maybe move this to the top. But the issue with that then is then you're asked to pay a bill, but you don't know like the card balance. So we can move this down below. And again, it's not the best treatment in the world, but I can only spend so long on each page before this tutorial gets to like 4 hours. So I'm going to leave this with you and come up with your own iteration that you think works best. Now, one thing too that we might also want to add here is we take what we had up here in terms of like that subtle gradient. Now we can add that below. So it shows that there's elements below that we can actually scroll through. Now, I always say that if a format's not wrong, don't try to reinvent the wheel. So what we might just do real quickly is might just add in just this documents page here. Because what we can then do is we can then take our transactions, set this to our default, and set this to our variant 2 here. And then we have our documents. Now, one thing I might come back and do later on is show you like how we can scroll through this to make it like a little bit interactive in real life. So then we might change this to our documents. So this would be things like a statement. Right. So what we can maybe do is, did I make this a component? I did make this a component. Lucky, look at me. So we can go ahead, add a variant here. Maybe this is our documents. We're actually going to swap this out for a document. Please load. It took long enough, but we're back in business and that icon is now officially loaded. Okay. So what we can do is maybe we can put like account statement. I don't know, something like that. Account statement, and then just the date, or like PDF, March 15th or March 2024. I don't know, something like that. And then we can just get rid of this. And then what we can then do is back on our page here, we can just swap all of these out for the second variant that would call like a document or something. So, and again, what we can do is this can be like March, this can be February, this can be January. You can go back and change the dates and things, but there we go. So we have all our different account statements. One might be like a tax document, I don't know, things like that. And again, we can take the same item here and we can move it above as such. So they're just sort of leveraging sort of the same type of treatment. What we can do is we can reuse a lot of the same design, saw the same element to spin up additional pages. Now, one thing you might want to also add is some type of item here, whether it's like a download icon. And you know what? I think a download icon actually wouldn't be the worst idea in the world. So we already have a download icon right here. So I almost wonder if maybe we can just, instead of having an index page for the document, which could be nice, it can just be like a little download, again, at least just to give us something. So now when we go back to this page, we can see the download icon. I think it looks a little bit busy, so you might want to think about taking it away, but we're just going to leave it in there for now, no problem. Okay, so then there we have our documents. Now let's look at some of our other smaller interactions, like things like our sidebar. If I was to hit collective summary, like what comes up explaining what that is, or even something like a earn $100. How can I take advantage of that? Okay, so there's a couple of things that we want to do. So we can have a sidebar for our menu, but then we also might want something here for it's like earn $100. How, like some type of promotion. We also might want something here for us to click this, like what is the collective summary, like a summary of all the credit cards that you have on file. So what we can do is maybe we can just take this here, and what we're going to also do is take a heading, transactions, and something like, again, we can use the same treatment for it. We don't need to do something crazy for things like this. Refer and earn, like maybe if there's a referral program, we can set this to something like a large medium. No, we'll go H6 medium. There we go. Refer and earn. Share your link. Sign up for referral program. Share your link. Get paid, like that kind of thing. So what we can do is we can group these, set this to hug, group these together, set this something like 12, keep things nice and snug. Then we can add some auto layout, something like 24 And how wide is this actually? So this is 392. So we can just set this to 392. Set this to 392. Set that to fill, and set each of these to fill as well. Refer and earn. Then we can add some padding above. So it would be, we would add a fill. That's our surface default. Then we can add a stroke, which is our border. Let's go default subtle and set that radius to something like at the top, something like 24. And we might even remove the border, but we're just going to see what happens with it. So refer and earn. And let's have, I don't even want to search for an X button because it's going to take forever knowing how slow things are. Again, it looks like I'm working offline, but it doesn't look like my internet's down. So I'm not too sure what's happening there. But anyways, we might have an X button here. I don't have one handy, so let's pretend that we do. And then I might add that in after, but something like if you hit, this earn $100, what it's going to do is it's going to, on tap, it's going to not navigate to, but it's going to open an overlay, position that at the bottom center, and the animation would be move in from the top. So that kind of effect. And one thing we also might want to do as well is add a background, turn, close when clicking outside. And what we can then do is we can then play this here real quick. So if we preview this, we can see like what that interaction would be like. So if I was to hit this, we would get sort of the refer and earn modal, which I think looks pretty good in the grand scheme of things, something nice and simple. But I'm going to pause the video here, add an X, so you don't need to watch me wait for 50 minutes while the icon loads. But let's keep moving forward now that we have this simple interaction. So I added in that X, that close, but one thing we also might want to add as well is the ability to like copy that link. So again, if you sign up for a referral, you need to share your link with someone in order to actually what's the word that I'm looking for? Like get paid in this case. Now, what we can do, we can use this kind of treatment here where we have, if we hide our label, we can sort of have this field that we call an input that has a post tab. Again, I show you how to build this component on the in UI Collective Academy. But what we can maybe do is swap this out for like a copy emoji. Things seem to be working out, content copy. And then we can also hide this text entirely. Let's just set that to something simple like that. And then what we can do is we can, inside the fields, we can have something like HTTPS www.uicollective.co/Kirk's code to show that you actually have like a specific link associated with it. And then what we can do is we can just go ahead and just copy this in, okay? And then we can go ahead and then set this to fill. There we go. So it shows that we have like a code. And then we can go ahead, set this to, it looks like this is set to hug. Our frame here, why is this? Let's go ahead and copy these and then paste these inside. There we go. Something still looks broken here. So let's check our layers. So we have this. Our height, I'm not too sure why this is happening. So this is set to hug. There we go. So then we can go ahead and copy that link. Copy link. Maybe we can just remove that, or we can even just remove the button entirely and show that you can hit like that to copy that link. Okay, so it's up to you to play around with it. So now what we can do is on hit, when this is hit, we can add an interaction that on top, we're going to close this overlay. So now what we can do, we can go ahead, preview this. So if I hit earn $100, refer and earn, I go ahead and copy that and then close that as such. Okay, so now let's go ahead and build out our sidebar here. So I just grabbed an example here from Mobbin. So let's go ahead, just add in some text here. Now, first off, what we're gonna do, we're gonna build out this item here. So let's go with our personal details. Personal details. Oh, I spelled personal wrong. Sorry, that's kind of embarrassing. Personal details. Let's also go and find like a chevron. Find our chevron. There we go. And we can set this to round. And I kind of like their treatment here, where their chevrons are a little bit darker. So maybe if we set this to like our default subtle, yeah, I think that's faint enough. And then we can also add an icon here on the left-hand side as well. Our person. Bring one in. And we can also set this to round. And let's make both of these 18 by 18. So a little bit nice and snug, nice and small. Let's add some auto layouts here. Between all three of these items. And let's adjust the gap. So this is going to be something like 12. I can see that this here is set to 241. So let's set that to fill. There we go. Let's call this our sidebar item. create the component of this, bring down a copy, and now we can sort of replicate what they do here. So what we're going to do, we're going to add 4 or 5 items or so, similar to how they do. I see they also have a log out treatment as well. Now, one thing you can do is you can put the log out down here. It's pretty uncommon to log out of bank accounts. Again, I can't remember the last time I actually logged out of a bank account of a banking application. But anyways, what we're going to do, maybe just tuck it down there for now. And one thing too, I almost wonder if this might look a little bit better for you as a medium. Don't forget to apply your variable. There we go. So let's go ahead and just copy this text here. And now let's build out the group for beneath it, where we have like frequently asked questions. Set this to our body small, medium. There we go. Let's go with our terms and conditions. And conditions, privacy policy. And then maybe one more for like a security statement or something. Security statement. Oh, these should be set to hug, and hug. Sorry about that. Security statement. And then you might have a logout at the bottom. Again, you can make the argument that you still want logout to be a little bit visible, but we're going to leave that just tucked away for now because I'm a little bit of a rule breaker. Okay, so we have our items here. Again, make sure this is set to hug as well. Let's go ahead, add some auto layouts. And similar to how they do, where they have that sort of like welcome message again, because we don't have anything like that on our dashboard. It's not very personalized. Maybe we might want something like a hi Kirk. And let's set that so maybe like our H6 medium. There we go. So let's go ahead, select each of these items. So these are already selected. Add some auto layout here, and then let's make some adjustments. So first off, we want our height locked to 852. So set that to 852, and the reason why is because that's the same size as our frame here. So that's set to 852. Let's add some gaps, something like 24 by 36. And now one thing that I'm with iPhones, they sort of have, I forget what they call it, like that widget that goes at the top. So I'm kind of worried that this Kirk would get cut off. So if we maybe set this to something like 64, I forget what they call it, action bar or something. I have no idea. So let's call this maybe like our sidebar, and be sure to set this to fill, and then also to fill here. And again, you can go ahead and adjust these as such. I'm not going to make you watch me do that for now. Now, one thing I want to call out is I definitely should have made this a component, because instead of having to add the interaction to the menu across everything, I could have just added it once to the component of that menu. So apologies, that's on me, but we're just going to do it once for now. So on tap, we are going to move in. So this is exactly what I wanted. We're going to try it out, and let's go ahead and just preview this. Oops, that's not as I wanted as planned, actually. Sorry, I should have looked a little closer. We don't want to navigate to, we want to open the overlay. We can set that top right, move in from that side, close when clicking outside, and let's add a little background. And one thing as well that we might also want is an X. So we can add it and paste it in line with the name. There we go. And then on click, yeah, close the overlay. Perfect. So let's go ahead, just extend this out very slightly, and now let's play this here. Oh, but we didn't add a fill. Sorry, my mistake. So let's add a fill. Maybe we wanted that surface secondary as well. And now let's hope we did this right. There we go. So now we have that sidebar, and you can see how I like the bar that I was referencing that usually gets in the way of things. So we have a half decent looking sidebar. Again, if we had more time, we could go ahead and customize all the different things, but I can leave that part for you. So real quick, I just tweaked the sidebar to make it a little bit more personal, so we don't have all the same nav items. But now let's look at this treatment here for the filters, because we already have this type of treatment where if I was just preview this, if I hit earn $100, we sort of have that modal that pops up from the bottom. Let's try to take that same treatment and apply it to the filters as well. So let's just bring this down and move this out, give ourselves a little bit more space here. So what we can do, let's get rid of that for now. And then just filters or apply for, we'll just put our filters here for now. And what we can do then is let's get rid of this, and get rid of this. Now, what we can do, we can bring in both our radio button and also our checkbox. Again, I had radio searched already to make sure that Figma wasn't slow on me. And also our checkbox. If you're not too sure how to build these components, I do have tutorials on YouTube, but again, the more advanced ones are available in Collective Academy. So we have our radio button. Sorry, and that's a radio button icon, not our actual radio button. Radio button. Where is it? Oops, sorry, let's search for a radio. Sorry, pulled in the wrong one. There we go. So there we have our medium radio button and our medium checkbox. And what we can do is we can have different types of filters. So maybe the radio button would only be used if only one of those filters could be applied. But this could be a checkbox could be used if multiple of those filters could be applied. So what we have here, we might want to call this, maybe if we focus on our transactions to start, maybe we might want to go with in terms of filters, what's good? Dollar value. So a dollar value, you could apply multiple transactions. So in this case, we might want to use a checkbox. But for something that you might only want to use once, or only one type of filter, struggling to think of one right now, but we're going to loop back to that. So let's just copy any text that we have here. So this is our body medium. Maybe we want to set this to our body small. Body small, medium, and our dollar value. So then we can have like the different ranges here. So we can have like 0 to 50. We can have also 50 to 100, but what we can do is just copy this. So make sure that's set to fill. There we go. And we have 50, 51 to 100. And then we can also have, so let's copy these. There we go. Copy these down. So then we might have like 100 to 200 to 250. We can have 251 to 500, and we can have 501 to 1,000. So you can see the different ranges of your purchases. So then we can go ahead and just paste that in, set that to fill, and also set these to fill as well. Just extend these all the way out. There we go. So we have all the different filters for the different dollar value. We can also add a description here as well. Let's maybe filter your transactions by dollar value. Filter your transactions by dollar value. So that's something like 8. And then we might want to copy this. And then just as an example of how we might want to do this, set this to something like 24. Then you can maybe have like category, right? So filter your transactions by category. And for category, again, just as an example to show you how we could use a radio button in here, even though category could probably be applied multiple times for transactions. So let's just copy this in here. Again, you could also make these components as well. So there we have our radio button. There we go. And paste these in. So there we have our radio button, and let's just set these to selected and also to selected as well to make it look a little bit real life. And then we can have our different categories, something like transportation, food and drink, self-care, groceries, and then something like entertainment, so on and so forth. Okay. Now, one thing I actually don't really like now that I'm seeing it is that subtext, probably not really needed. And what we can do is we can increase the gap to something like 36, and then make both of these our maybe our semi-bold to offer some differentiation between the different filters. Okay, so with those filters applied, maybe what might also want to make that the secondary is now what's a treatment that we could apply in order to apply these filters, whether to apply the filters, clear the filters, so on and so forth. Let's take a look at that real quick next. So we're going to want to explore a treatment that will work if we only have a small number of filters, but also we have a large number of filters. Maybe it's higher up on the page, and it's going to require some actual scrolling. Again, a treatment in order to apply filters and reset filters at all times. So let's go into our assets panel and just search for our button. So let's bring this one in, and let's also look for our link as well. Figma is really slow for me these days. Comment below if Figma is also really slow for you. So let's set that to a default, and that's also default. Again, I have tutorials on how to build these components, but the more advanced ones that I'm using here, these are available on our academy. So this here is going to be set to like apply filters, and we can maybe apply like a number to it, like something like 3, and then set this to something like reset. So let's select each of these, add an auto layout, and then add 12, and maybe like something like 18. There we go. Again, just to start, and align it so they're always on either side of each other. Let's go ahead, add a surface default here. Now, one thing we're actually going to do is we're going to connect these frames together. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to get rid of the radius on here, and we are going to remove the border as well. Because what we're going to do, we're going to connect these together and apply it at the new parent frame level. Set this to 0 and make sure this is set to fill. Sorry, let me move my video bar out of the way. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set a radius here to something like 24, and then a radius here to something like 24. And now at the overall frame level, we're going to set the stroke to border default subtle, again, on the outside. And we can turn clip content on in order to make sure that those radiuses are nice and crisp. Now, what we're also going to do, we're going to add a stroke down here, which is going to be our border default subtle, but only at the top level. Okay, we don't need it on all the other levels because, again, our borders are on the parent frame. Now, a couple things here is, let's be sure to set that to fill, which is notice how when I shrink the size of the frame, is our new frame doesn't stay at the bottom. That's because we need to set this to fill. And now you can see that as I scroll down, the other filters go behind the bar that we have at the bottom. So it's always going to stay stuck to the bottom. Now, one treatment that we explored a little bit earlier is, what if you maybe have your filter at a height of 620, but there are other elements here. So it might be difficult to see if one is behind this element. So we're going to need some type of treatment to let the user know that it's scrollable. So what we can do, we can bring back in what we had before that we built for this component or this page a little bit earlier, and just position it. Now, one thing we're going to want to do is just position it at the bottom here. And with it positioned at the bottom, we're going to want to set our constraints to left and right, and then bottom. So what that's going to do is, it's kind of a weird size. We maybe set it to like something like 126 or like 25, whatever. Is as we extend it up and down, this is always going to stay. The height is always going to stay 125. It's always going to stay in the current location. So regardless if our filter pop up is this tall or this tall, that's always going to be there. Okay, so pretty good hack for you in order to always show, if you have a lot of filters, to show that the user can scroll to apply more filters. And there we go. Now, one thing we can also do as well is also add the interaction here, which on filter, we can, on tap, we are going to open the overlay, close when clicking outside, hit the background, position centered, and it's going to be moved in from the top. And then this should be close overlay. Beautiful. So we can preview this. So then there we go. There we have our filters. But one thing that's happened here is it looks like to be in the centered. So apologies there. So it can be bottom center. So now let's try this. There we go. So one thing we can also do as well that I'm noticing is that we can probably move our bar up just a little bit. So what we can do is maybe just set this to something like 24, and then just move this back up as such. And now we can go ahead and preview this. Oops, sorry. We're going to preview the entire. So we're going to filter, and there we go. Looks like we have a little bit more breathing room. So beautiful. There we go. And again, you could probably even add a little bit more if you'd like to. So we can apply different filters now to our transactions. So I think we're in some pretty decent shape for our app overall here. So we have some onboarding, we have some of our initial pages and some of the different interactions. Now, one thing we might want to do before we add interactions to the entire app is maybe we can make some tweaks to our onboarding to better align with sort of the look of the actual application. Because again, on our actual application, we don't have this treatment here, right? So what we can do is we can sort of get rid of this and maybe just make these so it's the darker versions. So our caption and then also our heading. And be sure to adjust these as well. and our icon defaults. And then we can also do the same here, where we can get rid of this, make some tweaks as required, make some tweaks where our text primary on color. So you're just swapping the colors out. Again, tutorial is already available on how to build this library that I'm using. And again, this is for free. Surface default. Oops, sorry. Let's maybe just start fresh here. I think I changed one of these by accident. So let's go ahead and just reset this component as a whole. Reset the instance. Add another account and then continue. So let's set that to fill. What we're going to do is we're actually going to make this one the default now. Default, add another account, and then this here is going to become our subtle, where this one is going to be continue. There we go. And let's just focus on here. So this is going to be our caption. So this is, we have our account linked, and we can also maybe play around if we just set this to our default so it stands out a little bit more. Something like that's fine. And we also have that treatment here as well. What we can do, we can maybe get rid of that background again, and then make some tweaks here where we might have our text on caption becomes our caption, our heading becomes our heading, and then we can make some tweaks with this as well. So if we go to our main component, is maybe all the defaults are going to become the darker, and then all the smaller ones here. So I select these are going to become the lighter version. Oops. It's just really inversion of colors, and just making tweaks to make sure like things are aligned a little bit. This is our defaults. Again, we can call this our loading interaction. There we go. So if we go back to our loading page here, so now it's a little bit, this stands out a little bit more. Again, so just making tweaks so that our items are aligned in terms of look and feel. We don't have treatments on our onboarding that are never used anywhere else within our application, just to keep things a little bit more in check. One thing I just want to check here. Perfect. It has our surface secondary. It looks a little light for me. Beautiful. So I think we're in some pretty good shape now that we've sort of made some subtle tweaks to improve the consistency of our application. So now we can focus on the actual prototyping of the application itself. Now, one thing I want to highlight is prototype effects. There's a lot that you can do in Figma to make it fun and exciting. As an example, after this loading page where it's building our experience, maybe then it takes us to this page. But if it just lands on this page with everything preloaded, that's kind of boring. So what we can do in Figma to impress our clients, to impress our team, is again, use the smart animate functionality that we looked at a little bit earlier in order to build some cool interactions. So what we're going to do is I just copied a version of our home, and we're just going to move all the elements out of the way. So just hide them. So this comes in from this way. This might come in from this way. So they're still in the frame. We're just hiding them. And then we're going to use our smart animate, where if we go into prototyping, and we can remove these from here. There we go. Where on the frame, after delay, what we're going to do is we're going to navigate to this page here, so our home, but we are going to add a smart animate, and I like gentle. And what this is going to do is after a certain amount of time, so you go from your loading screen to this page here, which loads all the elements in right away and brings them in a little bit of a cool fashion. Let's look at this example. Sorry, words are tough. See what happened where all of a sudden we're on this frame here where there's nothing on it, and after a small delay, all the elements are pulled into the frame, where it's just transitioning to the frame with everything on it. But because we're using smart animate, is recognizing that the same layers are still there. So again, preview again. After a certain delay, you have that nice interaction. So if you're opening up the app for the first time, it's a little bit more professional, it's a little bit more modern to see that type of interaction, especially when loading up the page. It's the first page or the home page. We wouldn't want that on every page because that get kind of exhausting after a while. So again, navigating via the navigation here, we wouldn't want that type of treatment. But when we're going from like a sign up right into your home, or for a login or sign up right into a home for the very first time, or every time you log in, having that type of treatment can go a really long way to making your app feel super professional. So there we go. There we have an application that we can use for ourselves, for a client, or even bring into our own portfolio as well. We've done some great research, again, using Mobbin for home landing page, onboarding, dashboard, and some other pages as well. Also, too, we've built a number of components that we use in our applications, including some complex, smart animate logic. We've built the screens for that as well. So the homepage, all of our different onboarding processes, even added in some interactions as well for things like our homepage here, where if I preview this, we have this beautiful interaction for our homepage. We have our homepage transactions, different filters that are applied again at the prototype level. Or I hit filter, I can see that. I can also close that as well. Our cards, our card index, our documents, and even an awesome sidebar that we can show off in our portfolio to a hiring manager or a recruiter. So there you go. A lot more content on the way, including full page applications. And this application itself will be available in the Collective Kit, which is a part of the All Access Pass for UI Collective Academy. So be sure to drop that, subscribe, and see you at the next video. Hey, thanks so much for watching today's video, everyone. If you want to watch a video, I highly recommend it. Click right there. If you want to watch our most popular video, click right there. And be sure to hit that subscribe button for more content on the way. Be sure to comment below with more application ideas you want me to build or other video ideas, and I'll be sure to add it to my list. Thanks so much for watching. Remember to hit subscribe. See you at the next one.